What's up, everybody, and welcome back. Today's episode is brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. Let's head over there, check it out. On their website, blackriflecoffee.com, it looks like the celebrating 10 years of America's coffee. So a celebratory roast, Medusa's Madness. So it's Medusa wearing a set of panos on her head. That's pretty cool. I bet you that comes as part of the ECS. Let's hit what that says. Yep, the ECS, exclusive coffee subscription. So you could do that if you want to, and if you do that, you're going to get what I will call a bespoke bag of coffee every month delivered right to your door. It's always going to be different, and it's kind of awesome, especially if you're a coffee head. Below that, I mean, I've talked about all of this. The light roast to the darks, the slider there can take you that. The apparel, the gear, the coffee bundles, the coffee samplers. Think about the holidays at the coffee shop here in Kalispell. We're already thinking about getting stuff out there so people can gift coffee things, coffee itself, what to drink coffee out of, all of that stuff, depending on whatever it is you're into. So head on over to blackriflecoffee.com. You can support the podcast by supporting the brands that make the podcast possible. My guest today is Matt Dawson. He and I met years ago at the SHOT Show in Vegas, which is... I don't even know how to describe that show, but I digress. You want to talk about a man that has pushed the boundaries of what is possible from a physical limitation perspective. Matt, I'd say, got his chops in the finance world. My word's not necessarily his, and he explains it anyway. And then I think realized, like a lot of people do, that money isn't the direct pathway to happiness that a lot of people think it would be. And he, went deep. And he went dark as far as how far he was willing to push himself. The cool thing is he did all of that to fundraise and to make a difference. He's the founder of Dawson's Peak, which I'm going to put the links down in the show notes, and we talk about it during the episode, so I'm not going to break it down too much. He's got a project going on, 7 for Soldiers. We're talking world records. We're talking, on-foot travel in Antarctica, deserts, extreme feats of physical endurance, rowing a boat across the Atlantic, things like that. So, fascinating episode, and it really helps recalibrate what people think is possible from a human being. Episode number 359 with Matt Dawson. Enjoy.
Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. Get cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
What do we got going on over there?
What's that?
It's a little bit tabbed. People aren't going to be able to see that, but talk to me about what you have going on there.
What's funny is I'm actually a few pages behind the tabs. I mean, I got to put a couple more in. It just helps me keep it organized. So I'll have different colors for different things.
What do we got?
Just like
Book,
a quick reference. Book, podcast, branding, marketing, flight stuff.
Are they ideas that you're having and then you will tab it, or do you create certain sections and then you try to be creative inside of that section?
Now, basically what I do is this is just kind of a quick reference I have. So if I'm having, calls or anything like that, I can have the call. Like if I talk to say Katzenberg earlier, then I'll make a note, highlight, who I talked to, all the notes, and I'll just tab.
Was the first note in there with Katzenberg likely waste of time?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, because that's what every time I had ever met with him or tried to do things with him, nothing came of it. So I could encompass 5 years worth of experiences with him to waste of time. Eric,
but at least he's entertaining to talk to.
Is he fully running branding at 511 at this point?
Yeah, as far as I understand, yeah.
Okay, because that's where I met him as well.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember, but you and I met briefly at SHOT Show. He introduced us back in 2021.
I do not remember
something
that.
Like
SHOT
that.
Show was
literally we talked
whirlwind.
for 30 seconds.
Okay,
and that was it. But that's when I first started working with him. That was back in 1920. That he introduced us just for a second, and that was
1920. I'm not that old.
No, in 1920. In 2019 or 20.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say, damn man, how old do I look? I know I'm getting some grays, but Michael,
yeah,
let me know I need face serum. I feel like I'm looking old.
You look very old.
How did you end up? How'd you end up working with them? I mean, your background is diverse. You are an adventurer's man for sure. How'd you cross paths with them?
It was funny. It's kind of the old world meeting the new. Is the first bank I worked for in LA. It was the largest boutique investment bank on the West Coast.
What does that even mean? A boutique investment?
Exactly. So investment banking, offers a whole host of services. And what we did was we focused on mergers and acquisitions, so M&A, fairness opinions, valuations, that type of thing. So we were helping people buy and sell companies between about 50 million and 250 million.
Was your role in that to evaluate it and then help them through the process?
Basically, it could be anything. So normally at that time, we were working with private equity firms. Okay. So people that have money, or sometimes are strategic, they'll come to us and say, listen, I want to purchase a company and, like a competitor, or I want to, expand my operations, or I want to, diversify vertically or horizontally along the, whatever line you want to talk about.
Yeah.
So they would come to us and maybe they have identified a target or maybe they haven't, or someone can come to us and say, listen, they're a manufacturer of widgets of, whatever it is, and they do $200 million a year. They want to sell the company for whatever reason. And we would find a buyer for them. We'd run the process. We'd do all that, then we'd take a cut of the deal.
I was going to say, where's the scrape there?
That's what it is.
Where's the VIG?
Yeah. Normally it's about 1% to 3% is the value of it that we would
1%
get.
1% to 3% of a large number is a large number.
Yeah. You sell a $100 million company, you can make, $3 million, something like that.
Now, you were working for a bank though.
Yeah.
So what portion of that scrape do you get?
I got a portion of the portion. I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Not as much as I thought I should have gotten. But in a nutshell, that's how I got hooked up with 511 was when I first got there. Francisco Morales, one of the founders of 511 and the original CEO and all that, we actually worked with 511 one of the first years I was there at that bank.
Okay.
And then, he and I just, met very, very briefly. And then a couple years later when I started Dawsons Foundation and started kind of putting everything together, I just called Francisco out of the blue and he said, listen, go down, meet with Deb and meet with Eric Katzenberg. And I went down there and met with them, felt like I'd known them 20 years and, they joined that day and we've been working with them ever since.
God, that's crazy. I've never owned a business and thought about selling it. I guess I had never thought through the mechanics. If you grow it to a point and you wanted to exit it and you didn't know how,
yeah,
that would be tough, especially if it was doing well, if it had value. It makes sense that there is a service like that exists of people that can take you from A and connect you with B, or C, or whatever, E, F, G, whatever it might be that would want to buy that.
Well, it's a very important service because, look, I've been doing it for 20 years.
You're still doing it?
Well, I still do it kind of on a project by project basis where if I see a deal, if I have the time, I want to work on it, then I'll work on it. So I'm still a managing director with an investment bank. I've got 4 licenses with FINRA, the regulatory body that are all, current, that type of thing. But when you think about it in the context of, at this point, we only work with entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. So these businesses, are the biggest thing these people have worked on for 30, 40, 50 years. Sometimes they've been in a family through generations. We sold a company a couple of years ago that was like 120 years old. And this is like the biggest thing that most of these people have gone through. And there's a big difference between building a business and selling a business. And that's the challenge is you've spent generations or decades or whatever building this business. Now, how do you elicit the most value out of it so that you can take some chips off the table, move on to the next phase of life? And it's a big deal. It's a big responsibility, but it's, we get to work with very successful people. It's pretty interesting work and it's a lot of work, to do that deal.
What do you see as far as mistakes people make where they're actually taking value away from their entrepreneurial journey? Where are they fucking up and the money is going in the wrong direction?
Right. If you're talking about financial value, like, so it's just a lot of times is people don't build a business. There's different phases of a business's life. There's kind of the build phase, is kind of getting off the ground. And as 90+% of businesses fail in the first couple of years. Then it ain't
easy. As somebody who's 2 years into a business, it's a coffee shop. Yeah,
exactly. And the fact you've even been around for 2 years is a success,
That could be just due to stubbornness and frustration. It's hard to say, but also it doesn't help to sell an addictive product.
Yeah. But it's like once you get the business up and going, there's a big difference between running a business and selling a business. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of people don't realize is it's a long timeline for this thing. It's a long lead time. So to get a deal done traditionally was 6 to 9 months. Now you're looking more at like 10 months to a year, something like that. And it's a lot of times is people that grow these entrepreneurially owned businesses don't have the proper systems in place to take the business to the next level. And that's what a lot of buyers are looking for, because if you're going to sell a business, say for pick a number, $50 million, but the buyer has to come in now, invest, $5 million, put the right systems in place, that's a different thing than if, they don't have to build that, put that in place.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of people don't get the value that they could get because they haven't positioned the business for a sale. They simply run it like an entrepreneurially owned business. But then also is when buyers come in, they are going to tear that thing to pieces. They want to see absolutely everything you have, all the information, all the analytics, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people fail to have the proper systems in place where they can't provide that level of detail. And that scares a lot of people off, but that also can detract from value because I can't tell you, where my margins are coming from or where my expenses are going properly, things like that. So people will kind of build that lack of information into the price, and it'll kind of take some money off the price. So now you're not getting what the maximum value you could get because you don't have the proper systems in place.
How often do you encounter people trying to sell companies and they're just full of shit?
Honestly, with where we are, not that often because, the smallest client we'll take on is about 30 million of enterprise value and we'll go up to about 200 million, something like that. So when you're playing in that range, these are generally pretty real companies. But look, we've had companies in the past where we got maybe 8 months through the process and it was going to be about a $300 million deal. Is in a telecom space, and then come to find out the CFO was skimming the books. The CEO knew what was going on.
Yes,
and basically it's just they were just kind of moving things around, hiding stuff that they shouldn't have been doing. They had,
probably praying they got sold so they could take their scrape.
Exactly. And they were just kind of playing games. They were kind of hiding losses. They were moving money around, and they got found out. And that's normally what happens. So it's like, it's like the kind of a take on an adage is there's three things you can't hide, the sun, the moon, and the truth. And this stuff comes out in the diligence process.
What's the wildest thing you've seen in your career in banking? Like the craziest deal you've ever seen? Broadly, if you need to protect identities, obviously.
Yeah, it's a great question. I wish I had an exciting answer. I really do. I was like, here, listen to this one.
Like some Chinese company that has trucking containers full of dildos that are like, Michael's like, what?
Yeah, look, I wish I had a crazy story. It's probably that one where it's just you get so deep in the process. And listen, I was going back and forth between LA and New York. I was basically living in New York for months and months and months working on this deal, working 90 hours a week for 9 months, 10 months. And the thing fell apart with about a month left. And I was going to be about a $300 million deal. I was going to make some good money. The bank was going to make some good money. And it just, we started going through some emails and started looking at some things. And just all of a sudden you're like, this can't be what I think I'm seeing.
When did you realize it was?
When we brought it up, on a conference call with the CEO and the CFO, and it was just bullshit. And you could just smell it, and they were just digging. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the information, and what you're telling me is not jiving with what I'm seeing. And I was just like, this can't be it. And then it turns out it was.
Who pays you in that instance where the sale doesn't go through?
Well, it's interesting. It depends on how your comp works. Is some banks it's you could go commission only. Some banks it's you have a base commission splits things like that. So it just kind of depends. But I can tell you I still got paid on the deal.
Okay, good.
But it wasn't anywhere where I was going to get paid on it, and that one kind of stung a little bit.
Any particular businesses that you've seen that you just didn't realize had the value that they did? Like some crazy widget you would have never thought of that sold for crazy amounts? I
can tell you exactly. So when I grew up, my parents they were a sales rep for the largest manufacturer of playground equipment in the country. Okay. So stuff at like city parks, behind churches, at schools.
I had never thought there would be a sales.
That's what I'm trying to say. Is people see playground equipment, they think that just came out of nowhere. It just it
or
kind of
city has it somehow
exactly
in a warehouse.
Exactly,
yeah.
And you just kind of pop it out there. But I'm telling you, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So city parks, amphitheaters, building city parks and putting out benches and trash cans and stuff like that. So when I grew up, and they also did stadium lighting, which a lot of people don't consider, anything like that. So I've kind of grew up in that industry and around these different industries that people don't realize even exist and don't realize the value in it. So, as far back as I can remember, I've kind of seen that. And you'd be amazed at how many of these things. It's like, my book here. So, the guy that you see how the colors get printed.
Yep.
The spring that goes in the pen that shoots the color.
Totally.
That could be a $50 million company. It's things, these microphones, the magnet inside of it, the company that creates the magnets. There's a piece in that machine that creates a magnet that goes inside the microphone. That could be $100 million company. It's just you don't realize how much value there are in these places, things we just take for granted.
Yeah, man. How'd you get into banking?
So after college I tried to play pro football. So I moved from Philly to Dallas. I was there for a couple years and had to overcome some surgeries and things like that. And finally kind of got back in shape I needed to be in, had a couple tryouts and was on waivers, invited to training camps, all that kind of stuff. Finally had a couple contract offers, but I realized at that point I was just going to be a journeyman, for a few years, get my head kicked in and that was going to be it. So my degree was in management with basically a minor in finance.
Okay.
So it's like I knew I wanted to get started in some type of finance, but it was originally going to be private equity or venture capital. It just because it just seemed a lot more interesting to me. Kind of buying and selling companies or starting companies, investing early stage, stuff like that. And really in the U.S., if you're going to do it, it's New York or L.A. And I'd spent enough time in college. I'd been around on the East Coast in college, and I'd spent time in New York. And I was like, I don't want to live in New York, so I moved to L.A. And I just couldn't get on anywhere. Private equity or VC, it was just a tough time.
What year was that?
That was like after football. It was like 03, something like that. 03, 04.
So the housing market had not quite
hit there.
Actually,
but
it was apexing. Probably
it was exactly.
It was on the way up.
It was still on the way up. But it's tough to step out of school and go straight into private equity VC. That's typically for B school folks. They've done their time in investment banking, gone back to B school, gotten their MBA, and then step into these other industries.
Okay.
So then I said, I'll just go with investment banking, but I wanted to focus specifically on M&A. It just seemed a lot more interesting to me. And so I joined, like I mentioned, at the time, the largest boutique bank on the West Coast. And, started doing that and never thought I'd be in it, 20 years later. But it's interesting because you get to work with guys that have just built these, very successful companies. Entrepreneurially owned is all we work with now. And it's just, basically I've gotten paid to get my MBA across so many different industries and just get such a wide breadth of knowledge. It's been, pretty interesting overall.
So, and starting in the early 2000s, we're somehow almost in 2025. I know how calendars work, but it's still a shock.
It's crazy.
The environment for somebody to start a business, the environment for somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur, would you say it's largely the same level of opportunity and foundation and ecosystem? Has it changed? Has it gotten better, worse? What's your take on the entrepreneurial landscape right now?
I would say right now it's probably a little bit easier. It's just because the access to information now is just so much better, and it's so much faster, and we're just all so much more connected, and you can just getting the answers you're looking for, getting connected to people with the right answers, or getting connected to financing sources, things like that. It's even though there's more competition out there, it's just so much easier to get these things kind of up and running, and also it's easier to start hitting these home runs or to gain larger market share faster than it was, primarily through social media, through online advertising, things like that. Because before you had all these kind of traditional areas you had to go into that were very structured, whether it be distribution, manufacturing, marketing, things like that. And now you can just be a lot more kind of creative and kind of open-minded in kind of how you're approaching things, where you don't need necessarily to go through these typical historic gatekeepers. Now you can go directly to your consumer. Now with Amazon, or just online retailers, things like that, where a lot of times people were going brick and mortar before and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, signing leases, long term, all this exactly stuff like that. Now you don't need that, anymore. Or at least maybe not for a proof of concept. Or maybe you're like, I am going to go brick and mortar, but now you launch something and you hold that off for a couple of years where you have kind of more resources to support it. And now maybe you kind of even change that strategy, or you just move away from it altogether.
You notice an impact from the rise in AI?
Oh, no question.
Where do you see it pop its head up the most?
I think for lack of a better term, in terms of kind of things that can be created. And I don't mean that, and I know that's a very broad statement, but to give you an idea is I'm seeing it even in our industry, is in providing services, to these, middle market companies, where historically when we would take a company out to market, is we would spend weeks and weeks and weeks, or even months writing what's called a book or an information memorandum. And this was like a book from scratch. And this book could be 30 pages, could be 100 pages. And we'd take that and we'd send it out to potential buyers or investors, whatever. And now a lot of banks are using AI technology to write that stuff.
I'm sure it's taking probably less than a few months to create.
It's crazy, man. They just kind of plug some stuff in, hit enter or whatever you hit for that stuff, and it's just kind of spitting that thing out. And honestly, I don't think the quality of work is as good as we used to put out. Exactly, but it's in such an infancy. But it's just you're getting out so much faster, and you're like, you know what? It's kind of the 80-20 rule. It's like I'm getting 80% of the stuff in there, but I'm getting it out in a week as opposed to 8 weeks. And now, people are just, so I'm seeing AI get incorporated really into everything.
Do you think it makes an entrepreneur's life easier?
I think it can.
Probably depends on what sector you're in.
It depends on what sector you're in. It depends on your knowledge of it. It depends on, how you're able to utilize it in the space. I think some people might rely on it, too heavily at this point. And I think that's one of the challenges is when the barriers to entry have started to come down the way they have, where instead of, say, memorizing all the stuff like you and I did come up through school, whether it be, history or math or social studies or geography or whatever, now people are just kind of looking things up and Googling it and finding it out in 2 seconds. I think there's a positive to that and there's a negative. And I think that the same applies with AI, is that it's important, I think, to understand the basics of how it's generating what it's generating or where that information is coming from and not just kind of taking it for gospel. Yeah. And I think that more and more people these days, especially younger folks, just kind of punch something in, hit enter, and whatever spits out, they're like, that's the answer. And there's no critical thought or analysis going in behind understanding why is it saying what it's saying, and do I agree with it? And if I don't agree with it, or what's the other side of of this case?
Yeah, how do I double check the authenticity?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people don't do that these days. They just hit, oh, there it is, and just kind of put it out there.
There's nothing like a Google Scholar that relies upon the first search result.
Yeah.
Of at the bottom will say 50 pages, but the first one is gospel.
Yeah.
Not that I've ever done that myself, of course.
Well, I think the key is you do that one, then you scroll down to like page 5, find something just totally random. So then if someone tries to call you out, then you just cite something that's just so out there.
Well, and you can see it slowly starts to deviate from whatever the machine thinks is true north as you start scrolling down. Like it's a little bit more like some zingers off into right and left field.
Exactly.
Which, I don't know, half the time I appreciate that and am more interested in that than the actual top result. Yeah, it's, social media I don't think is targeted for people our age. I'm in my late 40s. I don't even know how old you are.
Yeah, 45.
45?
Yeah.
God, I got you by 2 years now. I'm on it, but I use it more for entertainment, and I guess I don't have to for the podcast or the stuff that I do, but it helps me with the podcast and the stuff that I do. I look at my children though, and their peers and cohorts, and they're surrounded by people who it's an entire financial ecosystem, and they have become entrepreneurs by being on the social media platforms. It's wild, and I wonder what that will look like in a decade or 2 decades.
It's tough, and it's funny that you brought that up because I think about that a lot. And we've used with Dawsons Foundation and with Project 7 for Soldiers and all the stuff that I do. Obviously, we've had to be to rely on social media more and more. Personally, I hate it. I mean, I'm not that guy. I don't like here's a video of me, here's a picture of me talking this and that. I literally would rather go out and carry a 100-pound pack 5,000 feet up a mountain than shoot a video, a 30-second video and post it. There's something about it that it really bothers me, to do. But to your point is, today I just think unfortunately you have to do it, and it's just figuring out, I think, the right way to incorporate it to where you're being, your authentic self and delivering your authentic message and not doing it just to be, a monkey, with the grinder kind of thing. But it's just tough because you look out there and you see so many people that are being so successful that, in my opinion, they just seem just vapid, vacant people that there's nothing behind it. And I think y'all do a good job. I've seen you on social and personally and with Cleared Hot and all that.
I'm an idiot. I just act like myself.
But it's that's the thing about it. It's like, how do you get through that white noise and be your authentic self and kind of, but you still got to do it in a way because you're doing it for a reason. Yeah. And so it's maintain that authenticity, but kind of breaking through that white noise of all the other competition in the space. And I think it's just going to kind of get more and more challenging over the years to come. And that's something that we're working hard to try to figure out where that balance is.
I don't have a recipe for it. There is something for everybody online.
Yeah.
There is a guru in every space, if not gurus in every space, with a foolproof plan of just follow their system, and they're going to lead you to what financial freedom, spiritual freedom, Ferrari, Bugatti in your driveway, whatever it is. I wonder, those people who are showing that opulent wealth and success online, I mean, I would like to believe and hope that they are living an enriched life, that they're super happy, that they feel a sense of purpose. And in my experience, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. They're showing a life that is incredibly successful, and I wonder about who they are in real life.
Exactly. I think you hit it on the head, is that they're showing a life in order for you to be attracted to it, in order for you to buy their product or follow their program or whatever it is. But like with a lot of the stuff that you do and the stuff that we do is I've got nothing to sell.
Yeah.
Really. It's, obviously it's.
I got like t-shirts and stuff. That's about it.
You got some hats.
Yeah.
I saw a sticker on the site. Yeah.
There was a sticker, and we have some patches, right, Michael? I don't know. You fill the packages up.
Yeah, we have patches.
I have a few complaints, by the way, from emails. You continue to send the wrong things, just so you know. I'll forward those to you.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
No, but it's tough. Is that we do have services that we're going to be offering through the organization, things like that. But it's I think a lot of these people, to your point, is they do create something because there's an end game to it. The end game is they're trying to sell you something, and a lot of the stuff that we talk about is getting people to do things that don't require money. Through self-reflection of surrendering into various elements of your life, of connection with others, of being of service to others, of things like that. So when you don't necessarily have products to sell, like buy my course, it's a little bit different. But I think, to your point, people do create these things because they're like, hey, they want to make people envious of their lifestyles, and then sell you a product or service on how to achieve that lifestyle.
I often wonder what it would be like if the rug got pulled on just the whole social media experiment. Maybe not permanently, but 72 hours.
Yeah.
We don't know it's going to be 72 hours. It could be indefinite. I wonder the impact it would have on people's lives. For some people, I think it would be completely upending. But for most, I think their life would be appreciably better.
Yeah. Look, there's no question. I think, and it's something that, we talk about a lot with what we do, is we've gotten more and more kind of sped up, these days, and we're more connected than we've ever been. But I think that's led to a greater level of disconnection than we've ever had, not only from others, but from ourselves, is that we're constantly looking for this exterior stimuli, where most people, as soon as first thing they do when they wake up in the morning is check their phone, start sending this, start sending that. And they just sit there and just all this scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. It's like they need this constant stimulation. And when you do that, is you feel like you're connected to something else, but I think at the end of the day, you're just disconnecting more and more from yourself. And with a lot of the stuff that you do, like say get out and get, and hunting and things like that, it's very important to get disconnected, at certain times, and which enables you thusly to reconnect with yourself. And they say, the hardest thing to do is for someone to sit quietly with themselves.
I would agree with that.
And whether you're in a tree stand, whether you're hiking a mountain, whether you're doing whatever it is you're doing, but to be by yourself and to sit there and to quietly sit with yourself and to feel all the things that you're feeling, and to let all these subconscious things start kind of coming up that you are either consciously keeping down or subconsciously keeping down while you're constantly inundating yourself. I think would be a big challenge for people.
The hunting trips are an interesting experiment because most always you're in a place that has at least limited communication, and it'll be generally like the trip we were just on. The lodge we were staying at had Starlink, which they didn't have in the years before, which was frustrating because it was slow enough to kind of connect your phone, but not slow enough to get any goddamn information out of it.
Just to tease you enough
so
to tease you.
So you could see you had emails, but not download them. You're like, fuck, I need it. It was actually the worst. We're getting ready to go to a place in Wyoming where it's largely none. And I have a portable Starlink so I can maintain connectivity. But even in the forced disconnection, I sleep better.
Yeah.
My circadian rhythm is better. We go down when the lights go down. You have more interpersonal conversations. But you can feel the phantom vibration in your pocket of your phone going off. And goddamn well you don't have any cell service. Right. It's wild. It's tough to sit with yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. I like scrolling through reels and watching people get, motorcycle riders get hit by cars, and oftentimes I repost them. Everybody's welcome for that experience. But But yeah, it's healthier in the times that I don't, but I still willingly participate in it when I have the opportunity.
Yeah.
Like I check my phone in the morning to make sure I didn't sleep in. And then right after that, generally I'll, as I'm getting ready, drinking my first cup of water or whatever, I tell myself I'm going to check the news, which I do.
Yeah.
But then I close it up and you'll open Instagram. And before you even know it, and then I will catch myself. What the fuck am I doing?
It's funny you say that because that's what happens is you transfer from one to the other. Exactly. And I think that's the key. I was actually thinking about this, this morning is like we have these little moments that we can make these decisions that seem like that they're difficult things to do. But if we can just take that, literally just establish that control and exhibit that control for that 1 second from when you you close one app and you're going to open the other app. It's just let it kind of die down a little bit, take the control and make sure that you're doing the right things for the right reasons. And even like literally just 1 second is that you'll noticeably feel that anxiety start to lower. Then you sit there for 2 seconds and 3 seconds. I know this sounds a little funky, but it honestly, it works. Is you sit there and then you're able to maintain your own dominion rather than just being, another monkey just kind of hitting the button to get the treat.
Yeah.
And it's like anything else. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. But it's like, when I go out on these expeditions, like when I crossed, the Mojave recently, it took, 330 miles and just over 7 days. And I had no communication with anybody whatsoever. And it was so nice, even though I was moving 20 hours a day, in the middle of the Mojave, 100 degrees and sleeping for less than 3 hours a night, it was just so nice to be so disconnected, for a while and just to kind of sit there. I could feel my anxiety, high in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then every hour as I pushed on, I was just like, I could just feel it noticeably,
You
lowering.
have this, you start with this fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And a little bit into it, you realize, I just don't give a fuck.
Yeah. Like, what are you missing?
Exactly.
Like, what are you missing?
But yet you're afraid of missing something that totally is non-consequential. And
Yeah.
you have that anxiety. Yeah, it's that funny switch. It goes from like, oh my goodness, I'm missing out to, I actually don't really care.
But
and I don't
think
want to
about
turn my phone back on.
well, you and I are roughly the same age. It's like being in high school. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was like deep into college.
I skipped the college portion, but it was after high school for sure. Yeah.
Right. So you go through high school and it's like, you're going out on the weekends, you're doing whatever. You leave the house. There's no like, I'm going to go to so-and-so's house or I'll call them and leave a message or whatever. And like, you didn't have that level of anxiety because you didn't have those resources like a cell phone, to build that anxiety. But now if I'm going out, if I'm at my house, I'm like, I need to run and get, a carton of eggs and leave my cell phone. As soon as I leave, I'm like, what the hell? And it's like a minute after I leave the house.
How am I going to know how to get there? I've only been there 1,000 times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what if someone emails me? What if someone calls me? What if I have to wait 20 minutes to return a text? It's like we all fall into it.
Oh, man. Yeah. And we're all willing participants in it. How'd you get into the physical endeavors that you take part in?
Yeah, it started just with, we were talking earlier about cats over at 5'11" and everything. Yeah. It really came about from the formulation of Dawsons Foundation, which is, the charity that a good friend of mine, Jay Jablonski, and I started back in 2018.
What was your impetus to start it?
It's a long story. Long story short was, I was about 38 years old and, kind of tying it back to the investment banking and everything is I'd reached a certain level of success in banking where I was, very comfortable, professionally and personally. And, I was living in the Hollywood Hills and could have whatever I wanted within reason and all this. But, I was in a dark, dark place and I was disconnected from everyone and everything. I'd been partying for, 8 years or so and, drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. And I think if you saw me on the outside, you're like, this guy's, probably got his shit together and looks like he's living a nice lifestyle. But on the inside I was just disconnected. I didn't know kind of who I was, why I was doing what I was doing. I had no purpose in my life. I spent just, sometimes, weeks in bed just with this debilitating depression. Even the thought of turning and putting my feet on the floor, made me almost want to cry and just shake in pain. I was in so much pain and I'd been in that place literally for decades. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Is my entire life, I just felt different. I felt disconnected. I didn't know how to, relate to others. I didn't know how to give love or receive love. And I really couldn't feel a broad array of emotions besides anger, fear, and frustration.
Where do you think that comes from?
I think some of it was just wiring. I think I'm just kind of wired in a certain way. that's just something that I've kind of had to come to learn to deal with. But I think also, growing up is I had a wonderful family. Mm-hmm. I love my mom and dad dearly. My mom's passed. I've got a great sister, and my sister and I never wanted for anything from a physical perspective, but say on an emotional perspective is we really didn't have the emotional support wasn't what it could have been, kind of growing up. And I learned to be a chameleon, very early in life. It's just to be who I needed to be in a situation to navigate that situation. And it was just kind of like keeping my cards close to my chest. And I started unknowingly basing a lot of my self-worth and value on my performance. And by the time I reached, 18, I'd had, over $1 million in scholarship offers to play football. I was going to go to the Naval Academy. I was, 4.0, almost 4.0 student, all state, this and that, whatever. But, inside, I was just a scared kid. I felt like a bad person. I felt like I deserved to be punished, and I felt like I'd always fuck something up, or I'd find a way to fuck things up. And
damn, did you feel that way for as long as you can remember?
I tell you, it's interesting. I started to feel that way somewhere around probably second or third grade, and at that point is I've always had a lot of energy. And I remember at that stage I was getting kicked out of school all the time for misbehaving. And where I grew up, there's University of Alabama. This was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. A counselor from the University of Alabama would come by my school and talk to me 2 or 3 times a week, like pull me out of class, ask me about my emotions and feelings, and play with sticker books. And honestly, at the time, I thought it was because I was getting a reward. I was like, I'm doing these people love me, so I get this
They were doing a good job. Yeah. Like, yes, I would love to do these books with you.
You losers stay in class. I'm going to go play with sticker books and talk about my feelings. Like, I thought I was doing it. And then come to find, and then literally later on, like in college, it dawned on me, and I called my mom one day. I'm like, who the hell was that woman? And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, I was like, when I was in second grade and I was having to talk about my feelings and emotions, and she's like, I can't believe you remembered that. But I did. And it's just, she's like, you were getting in so many problems or having so many problems getting kicked out. They were going to kick you out of school unless we agreed to have you speak to a counselor. And I think somewhere around that age I felt like I was always being told that I was wrong or what I was doing was wrong. And I internalized it not as that my actions were wrong, but that I was wrong, as a person. Yeah. And that the best thing that I could possibly do was to not be myself, was to be whatever I was told to be or whatever I felt I needed to be in a situation in order to not get in trouble. And it's funny look, you've been through a lot, we've all been through a lot but even at this age, we're just big kids. And a lot of that stuff we're still processing happened to us so early on, is that when I got later in life where I'd made, good money and I could go out and buy this and buy that and date this person and go here and go there, deep down inside, maybe the 95% of it, I was operating, pretty well, but that final 5% was still that same stuff I've been dealing with my entire life. So even though I'm sitting there negotiating a $100 million deal, in the back of my mind, a lot of times I felt just like a scared child. That was like, you're a bad person. You're going to find some way to fuck this up, and you don't deserve to be loved. You don't deserve this. You don't deserve that. And that just kept playing just like on loop, in the back of my mind.
Did you share that with anybody in your adult life prior to?
Yeah.
You're saying that you were in bed for a couple of weeks prior to you realizing you needed to do something about it. Did you share those feelings with anybody?
It's a great question. I tried to, I think on 3 different occasions where I met with a professional. There was one time after I left the Naval Academy, I went to Wharton at University of Pennsylvania in Philly. Mm-hmm. I met with a counselor there, talked to him for a couple of weeks. I'm like, this guy, he just doesn't get it. Like, I felt like I was 10 steps in front of him, and we couldn't relate to each other. And then after that point, I met with 2 other professionals like in Los Angeles. And the same thing was they don't get it. Either I'm not communicating it effectively, or I'm not able to take on board what they're saying, or they can't take on board, what I'm saying. But either
they're just not the right person.
Exactly. It's just not the right person. And that was very frustrating. And it even led to, there were numerous times in my life where I was on the verge of suicide, where I'd reached that breaking point where it's just like, you don't care anymore. It's just, I was like, all I wanted to do is just to have this pain end and just to get out of this. And I didn't want anybody to even remember me. And if my family weren't around, is I know on more than one occasion, I probably would have gone through with it. And it sounds ridiculous, but even, before I started the organization, like I'd fantasize if there was a button that I could push and I'd just erase all knowledge that I ever existed. Like no one would miss me. It wouldn't impact anybody. I would be erased from ever existing. I would have hit that button on numerous occasions. Like it reached that point.
Had you ever thought about how you were going to kill yourself? And the reason I ask that, it's a macabre question for sure. But in talking to professionals, there are sometimes people who will talk about the desire or wish to kill themselves, which should always be taken seriously. Mm-hmm. But there is a much greater risk when they have already determined how they would do so.
Yeah. So yes, there are a couple different ways. Like, and this is all in the book, and it's tough because before I put the book together, I'd never shared this with anybody. But I think it's important to talk about it because when you get to these places in life, when you have this level of sadness and grief and despair, is we have a tendency to believe that we're all alone. Is that nobody can possibly believe this level of pain that I'm in, or how bad a person I am, or how bad I screwed up, or whatever. But at the end of the day, no matter what you're facing, it's been faced by millions of people, millions and billions of times.
Like it is being faced currently.
Exactly. Like I understand it sucks, it hurts, it's all that kind of stuff, but there's nothing unique about our pain. There's nothing special about it. And I think that's important for people to remember in order to relate to one another. But like when I was in high school I grew up, there were always guns in the house. I had a couple pistols in my room. And there were times when, I'd hold a loaded pistol to my head and I'd put my finger on the trigger and I'd just start pulling it. And I didn't at that time want to kill myself, but it's like I wanted to feel something because I literally couldn't feel anything. Like I felt like I was just wooden. And all I could feel was like pain, confusion, and frustration and just anger. And in those moments with the finger on the trigger, loaded, chambered, everything, and I could feel the slack coming out of the trigger, all that kind of stuff, I would feel something. I'd feel like a release is the best way to describe it. And I was 17, 18 years old. And I mean, it's hard to think that if I would have, continued down that line as I did that, numerous times, and each time I'd apply more and more pressure to the trigger. And then, as you know, in your former line of work there's only so much pressure you can apply before it's game over. And so you're walking a very, very thin line.
Playing a fucking dangerous game.
Exactly. So, I mean, I've been through that. Then when I was it just got to a point where I was like, listen, I've gotten as far as I can go. And if this goes any further, then my parents are going to walk in one day and I'm going to destroy their lives. And it's not fair to them because I know consciously they tried to do everything for me that they possibly could. Mm-hmm. And that's not right. And it's not right to have that impact on my sister. But like at University of Pennsylvania, it got to a point one time where I was just in such a bad place. I felt so disconnected and just alone and again, misunderstood and couldn't communicate effectively, couldn't get the help that I needed. I wrote a letter to my family and just left on the desk in my apartment. And I walked down to the football field and I sat at the base of the light tower. And there was nothing poetic about going to the football stadium because I played football. It's simply the highest point that I had access to. And I sat down there for probably 4 or 5 hours. And, and I was just sitting there looking at it and just thinking about it. And I was like, I want to do this so badly, but I know if I do it, my parents are going to get that phone call and it's going to destroy their lives. And literally, like I said, if they weren't around, then more than likely I would have, that would have been another point where, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Fuck, man. That is a rough journey. Are you free and clear of feeling that way now?
Honestly, no. It's and this ties back into your original question about the founding of the organization, all that kind of stuff. I've done so much work over the past 6 years, 7 years, things like that. Like all of my training is done alone. So I mean, I've trained for every single day. I train alone. Thousands of hours I've trained alone. Most of I try to do my expeditions alone. Things like that. Just because I want to be. When I'm out doing these things alone, it gives me a chance to reconnect with myself, on a different level and to kind of re-examine myself on a different level. But it's, what I've found is I think we can kind of work through the first 95% of the challenges that we face. And the challenge you face are going to be maybe they're same in certain situations. Maybe they're different than what I face or what Michael faces, but we all face, our own challenges. And the first 95% of them, I think, are the easiest to get through, although they can certainly be difficult and they can be, unique depending on the person. But that final 5%, like that deepest rooted stuff that we're all dealing with, I don't know if you can ever completely get rid of that. I think you can work through it. I think maybe you can get rid of like 2% of it, 3% of it. So now you're down to like 3%. But I think some of it might always be there because it's so hardwired inside of you. Like, to be, totally honest with you is I still struggle not to feel like a bad person a lot of times. I still struggle to receive love.
What's your metric for a good person?
That's the challenge is with me is it's kind of I can be unfair to myself because it can be kind of a moving target.
Yeah.
Where if you come to me is I can look at you and see the qualities that you have, or I can see the qualities a friend of mine has or something like that. And I can say, listen, look at all this that I see in you. But when I look in myself, I don't allow myself to see those same things. And then if I do see those same things, I'm like, well, but there's not this, then there's not this. It's kind of like a moving target.
Yeah.
Because what I found was, despite having a very secure household in some elements growing up, is also very unsecure in other elements. And kind of a theme that was incorporated in my childhood was something is always wrong. Is that it was just something was always wrong in the household. Something like, watch out because someone's going to try to get over on you, or this is going to happen, or that's going to happen. So I developed a level of comfort in crisis. Is like if I woke up and something wasn't wrong, I was all out of sorts. Like I was like, I need something to be mindful of or aware of or upset about or things like that, which can be good in certain situations. Like if we're out in the woods and we're going to get attacked by something, or you need someone on watch, like I'm the guy you want there.
Well.
I'm telling you, I'm the guy you want on a deserted island about survival situations. I'm great. But in days like, normal life, it's difficult because I don't have that constant, threat, that life-threatening threat or that existential threat. So therefore I kind of create it in certain things in order to get amped up, in order to feel good. It's like a dopamine release for me, which I understand is not good. But, tying back into that 5% is, let's say we can work through some of it, 2%, 1%, whatever. I think probably more than likely that last couple percent will always be there. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think you just have to be aware of what it's talking, what it's saying to you. And the key is not to listen to it, but to be, but to hear it, but you talk to it and you maintain control over it, rather than being a victim and having it maintain control or elicit control over you. I know that sounds a little kind of heady or maybe a little new agey, but you
have to choose with what you expend your energy engaging with.
Exactly. And that's what it is. It's the key is not to listen to it, but to, you address it. You recognize that it's there, but you address it. And again, I know it's not unique to me and my journey and my struggles, is that everybody, I don't care if it's you, if it's, Bill Gates, or if it's, some, NFL player or whatever that's making $60 million a year, is when you kind of, strip all the shit away, is we all have those little things that we're all carrying through, that we're all dealing with. Because I know you had the podcast recently, I think with your birthday, and like reflecting back and some of the questions you asked.
Yeah.
And, the 3 questions that Leah talks about.
Yeah, the birthday question.
Exactly.
Suck.
But I think, the first one, I forget exactly, but I think it was
the heaviest thing you carry?
Yeah, it's about maybe not feeling good enough for those around you. And that's what I'm talking about. That's that kind of that final 5%, that's part of your 5%. That we all kind of deal with.
And I think that can be healthy, because the desire to want to be better than you were yesterday can be very healthy, but could also be debilitating and demoralizing. Right. It's on how you choose how to engage with it.
Exactly.
So you do a lot of training by yourself. Do you talk to yourself when you're out there?
Oh, I talk to myself. I'm telling you.
Out loud, or just in your head?
Out loud.
Are you a good conversationalist?
At this point, I'm tired of myself a lot of times. I'm like, dog. I was like, I've heard this story 18 times, number one. Secondly, that's not how it happened.
I talk to myself all the time. Michael, do you talk to yourself out loud?
Not out loud, but I have a constant dialogue in my head.
How come you don't verbalize it out loud? And I only ask because I've been shocked I talk to myself out loud. You do.
Oh, yeah.
I'm shocked to find the number of people that don't.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I look like a fucking crazy person when I'm driving through town, because people are like, there's nobody in that car. Who's he talking to?
Like by myself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Every once in a while, like if I'd like do something, I'm like, oh, what the fuck am I doing? Like,
no, I mean, do you ever have like full on discovery conversations with you? Okay.
Alone.
I tell you, if I'm alone.
So we are either 3 incredibly normal people or abnormal people. And I'm not sure what
I've heard people answer the question both ways, but I'm telling you is I spend, hours and hours and hours every day talking to myself out loud, full-fledged conversations.
Well, you do ridiculous shit sometimes by yourself, like rowing boats across oceans and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So you have time to That's why I asked if you're a good conversationalist. I mean, you better carry both sides of that one.
Well, it's funny you talk. It's funny you talk about the row, and this is in the book. I mean, look, I was rowing 12 hours a day, and you're locked in. I mean, you're locked into the seat, to the oars, to the to the footwells. Like, you're not going anywhere. It's the same stroke. You got nothing else to do. It's finding different ways to pass the time. One of the ways was I'd tell stories, and I'd sit there and I would talk literally like someone was right next to me. And I was like, listen, I was like, you're not gonna believe this shit. I'm like, listen to what she said to me. And I would go into these stories. I was like, right. And literally nobody's sitting there, obviously. But I would tell stories for hours about, and sometimes it'd be good story, like fun. Sometimes it'd be like just pouring my heart out. Sometimes it would be like, man, I can't believe I did that, or I said that, or whatever. But these are full-fledged.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to say we're three normal people.
Yeah. But at the same time,
I've
wants
met
to be
a lot
normal?
of people who have looked at me when I said that I talked to myself out loud as if I had a third ear on the top of my forehead. They were like, what?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Okay, let's get into these endeavors you like to do, though. So it started, the Dawson's Peak. What is the premise of Dawson's Peak and the Foundation?
Yeah. So it just, quickly, because unfortunately it can get a little, detailed and all so, granular. So in a nutshell, is Dawson's Peak Foundation is a 501c3 I started back in August 18 with my good friend Jay Jablonski. And our mission is to inspire the discovery and pursuit of individual purpose.
Okay.
And the way that came about was, when I was going through that hard time in my late 30s, my mother passed away. I broke up with a serious girlfriend, and just life was just kind of just caving in on me. I talked about wanting to hit the button and all this kind of stuff. I reached that breaking point again where I was like, I'm either going all in or all out. Like I've had enough. So I traveled to Nepal. Spent 3 weeks hiking alone around Mount Everest. And this is, long story short, and it's all in a lot more detail in the book, is that.
Well, how'd you land on Nepal?
So I went out to dinner with a friend, a very good friend of mine, and he brought a buddy of his. And just randomly, this guy started talking about when he went to Mount Everest, to the base camp trek, 3 years before. And I'm telling you, at the time, I couldn't have found Everest on a map. I'm like, it's over there somewhere, number one. Number two, I don't give a shit where it is because it sounds terrible, like a terrible idea to climb a mountain. Yeah. I was like, why? That's just dumb.
And you had never done any physical endeavors like that
Nothing.
Before? Okay.
I grew up obviously playing football and baseball and track and all.
Exactly. The hiking to base camp of Everest is different.
It's totally different. So basically, for some reason, he just started talking about this journey that he went on, took a couple weeks, and it just fascinated me. I don't know why. Like before that, whenever I heard about that, I'm like, that's whatever. It's stupid. I don't want to even know about it. But for some reason, it's what I figured out is it's not necessarily what you hear, but it's also when you hear it. And sometimes you're more receptive. You don't even know that you're being receptive, but you're just kind of in that different headspace where you can just take information in for a different reason. He started talking about it, and I was just fascinated. And a couple weeks later, my mom had already passed. My girlfriend and I broke up, and I was like, I'm going to Everest. I was like, because I knew I needed to make a significant amount of change, and it wasn't going to work going to a therapist once a week or reading a book or listening to a podcast. I was like, I need to be removed from everything and everybody and make a life-changing, thing here. And what I've never been very good at being in the middle. I'm normally on an edge, somewhere. And I think that's where life is really enjoyed, is kind of in the margins. Mm-hmm. And that's where we learn more about ourselves. So I went to Everest, by myself, hiked largely alone for about 3 weeks around the Mount Everest region. And then about 3 days in, I was in the village of Tengboche. And in that village, 50 people, no roads. You walk in, you walk out. And there's a Buddhist temple there. And I was invited to join a service with the monks. So I sat in there for about an hour by myself with a room full of chanting monks. And I just started getting enveloped with these waves of energy to where it was literally taking my breath away at points. I'm like struggling to breathe. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? But something in my mind is like, just be present. Just try to experience this to its fullest. And after about an hour, I walked across the village. I sat down and leaned against this small stupa, which is a religious temple, and I'm looking right at Mount Everest. And it's still probably 4 days away, but she's so big. I mean, you can see her for, days away. And it's, 7 o'clock in the morning and the sun's rising and the clouds are moving across the front of it. And all of a sudden, I just lose it and start bawling uncontrollably like a baby. And next thing I know, I'm on my left-hand side in the dirt in the fetal position. At the time, I'm 242 pounds. I'm 40 pounds heavier than I am now. I've got a beard, down to here.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just big old chunky on the mountain. And I mean, Andy, I was in so much pain. I mean, physical, mental, emotional pain that it was excruciating. But something inside of me said, don't fight this. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to rationalize it. Just shut the fuck up and understand and just experience it. And after about 15 minutes, as I walked into this little tea, I was like, what the hell was that? I walked into a little tea house to have breakfast. They brought me a bowl of oatmeal, and all of a sudden I go to take my first bite and I lose it again. And I mean, people are now sitting around me and I'm embarrassed. So I'm covering my head and I'm just bawling into this bowl of oatmeal. And people have heard me, tell the story is that I cried so long and so hard. I remember watching my tears fill up that bowl of oatmeal. And I'm talking, it was deep of tears. And I look up and the room is now empty. These people are like, this guy's a effing nutcase. And I look to the back right corner of this room and something spoke to me. And you can call it, God or the universe or collective unconscious or an energy field or whatever. And it said two things. It said, you're not living with a sense of purpose and your life is only about you. And I'm telling you, I didn't hear it with my ears. Ooh. And I still have, every time I tell the story, I get goosebumps. Yeah. I heard it in my heart. I heard it in my fibers and cell and like every possible person, version of myself that I could ever be heard that message. And when it said that, I knew two things. I knew one, my life would never be the same. And I knew for the first time what my purpose was. And this thing told me, it's like your purpose is to help people avoid being in the situation you're in now, because I know what it is to be lost and alone for decades. And I don't give a shit how much money you have, how many people you date, how much stuff you buy, how much success you have, how many Super Bowls you win. That shit doesn't matter. When you're utterly and desperately alone and disconnected and isolated, it's a horrible place to be. And I was there for decades. I didn't know how to communicate that, to get out of that space. And that, I think that's without question what my purpose is to help people avoid that place, because I know that darkness and it's horrible. And also it gave me the understanding of the power and the magnitude of every single second. And that our life can change every second for good or for bad in a way that it will never go back and be the same. And then after that point, it literally took 2.5, almost 3 more years to figure out how I can incorporate that into something I can actually, put into practice. And eventually it was like, listen, maybe we'll start an organization. We'll put on these big global expeditions where people can see our athletes, doing things that are pushing human potential and draw a parallel between themselves and our athletes and to say, if this person's doing X, Y, and Z, then I can find something representative of that in my life that I can, try to overcome or apply myself to or challenge that I thought was bigger than I was. And that's in a nutshell, kind of how the organization got started. And then the first project we're working on now is 7 for Soldiers, where I was originally trying to set 7 world records in 12 months with 100% of the net proceeds going to the Dawsons Foundation and Hope for the Warriors.
What were the 7 world records?
So it's basically, there were a lot of activities. The first was the Explorers Grand Slam, which is climbing the highest peak on each continent, and then skiing North Pole, South Pole. So I was on track to be the 3rd fastest person to ever do it. I think right now there's been like 60 people that have done it, and I was going to be only the 5th person to ever do it in a single year. And then tracking solo and unsupported across the Mojave Desert, rowing across the Atlantic Ocean, and then flying a plane around the world.
What type of plane?
Well, it was going to be originally it's going to be a single engine. Like we look at, Pilatus, we looked at, a couple other, bigger Cessnas, Cirrus, things like that. And we went through that process for a couple years. And like right before we got kicked off is when COVID happened. And then right in the middle of the project is when Russia goes into Ukraine. So throughout the years, and obviously you know the space well, with your flight pass, is that we've had probably 3 or 4 planes that have been dedicated to us that have either gotten pulled last minute because the insurance rates went up or people didn't want to leave the country. Yeah. But then you started looking at insurance rates to fly around the world, fuel costs, all this kind of stuff. So what we originally budgeted got increased by about 4 or 5-fold. And it just got to a point where I was like, I couldn't justify spending that amount of money just to fly a plane around the world. I was like, I think we can spend this in other ways to generate, more more welfare for others or more interest for others than that.
It's such a tough balance. Fundraising is actually the hardest thing I've ever done.
Oh, it's brutal.
Because you have to figure out a way to get people's attention so that you can ladder it towards something that they might care about that's not going to get lost in the shotgun blast of the face every day of donor fatigue and GoFundMes to separate money from their wallet. But the things that you want to do are also not free. It's this vicious self-licking ice cream cone.
But it's like this. Look, the stuff that you've done, obviously, with with the 7 jumps, that y'all did, and then the wingsuiting, and all this kind of stuff. It's like this isn't just buying a rope to see how many times you can skip a rope in a minute. I mean, this stuff costs tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes,
but it's funny is if you go back and you look at say Amundsen, who's his race to the south, trying to get to the South Pole, or even like back to Christopher Columbus. Like if you read all these people that have done these things throughout centuries, they all talk about raising funds.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been something, it's not unique to, to modern day folks. I mean, people have been dealing with this stuff for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's extremely difficult to get people to care to a point where they're going to get involved in it. And like you said, is they get constantly inundated.
It's insane.
Every single day.
Donor fatigue is 100% real. Did you eat that bowl of oatmeal?
That one, I think I probably did. Yeah. I think I probably did.
It's a very teary bowl of oatmeal.
Yeah.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to know, to have that shattering realization of what it is that you want to do. And then you got to figure out how you're going to do it.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing is because I think when you watch these movies or you read these stories or whatever, and you're talking about, find your path. And then it's like this assumption.
Or your purpose.
Exactly.
Okay, I found my purpose. I know this is what I want to do. There are still a substantial amount of obstacles in front of me being able to do that. I have to meet my minimum criteria for life. Maybe I have a family. Maybe I have other obligations. My purpose is still over here. How do I do this?
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's funny. It's because we kind of have this understanding or this belief that once you find the path or purpose, then it's just going to be Care Bears and rainbows and every day is sunshine.
I think the hard work starts once you find it.
Listen, yes, exactly. You said it. That's exactly what I was getting at. Is after I found my purpose and I was going to be a purpose finder helper. I'm like, this shit doesn't exist, right?
I'm a purpose finder helper.
That's what I thought.
I would put that on a card.
Yeah.
PFH, Purpose Finder Helper.
Literally, it took, after that point, it took another 2 or 3 years to come up with the organization, the idea, things like that. Then I had to start training for it. Then I trained literally over 2,000 hours alone. After that point, I had multiple surgeries. I had multiple surgical procedures. I had broken bones and torn this and torn that and all this kind of stuff. That was just to get to the starting line of pursuing all these things that I ended up having a chance to do.
What was the first one you tackled?
The first was supposed to be North Pole, but it ended up getting canceled. So the first was Everest. First thing out of the box was Everest.
Michael, will you grab us a 6-pack of the water out of the fridge while I dig into this Everest story? Okay, so you'd seen Everest before. Talk to me about the actual experience of climbing Everest, because I know a few people who have done it, and there are the National Geographic stories of the beauty and the challenge, and then there's the stories you hear of human waste everywhere and dead bodies, which are in fact used as landmarks.
Right.
What was it actually like? Or, at the Hillary step, there's 300 people waiting, and you get time to go up there, and then you have to figure out your way to get down. What was it like?
It's a good question, and honestly, it's something that I'm still divided about. Internally, is that she's a beautiful mountain, and to climb her is to have the honor of doing that. Was just an incredible opportunity. And, first thing is no one conquers Everest. No one conquers any mountains. If she wants to take you, she can take you anytime. So first it's, get that level. Thank you, man. It's get that level of, ego out of your head. But, from a physical challenge standpoint, I absolutely loved it. Is that, looking back now, a question, next time I climb an 8,000 meter, if I'm going to use oxygen or not, I'm starting to have different thoughts on if the validity of accomplishing something, with that level of support, which, obviously I used at that point, and there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah. I mean, do you take pain meds when you're in pain? Do you take aspirin and ibuprofen?
No.
Ever?
No.
All right. So
but I understand the point. I understand the point. I understand the point you're drawing.
Do you go to the hospital, right? You have surgery?
I know what you're saying. But
it exists, and are we smart to not use those things? Are we paying homage to the past by not using the, you know what I mean?
I know. I know you're exactly. Listen,
Yeah.
I've stayed up nights thinking about this because basically when
I have
you're
no judgment either way. These are the questions I ask myself.
when you're on O is, oxygen is, and it's basically going to have your body feeling like you're at 23,000 feet.
Which is still very high.
It is. It's still very high. But there's a difference between being at 23 and 26 and 29.
Yeah.
And the question, that I have now is, look, I was able to summit on my first attempt, and I appreciate it and all this kind of stuff. But then I question, could I have done it, without the oxygen? And it's not just about having, managing your heart rate and physical performance and things like that, but also it's without oxygen, you get a lot colder, a lot faster. And I've got bad problems, circulation for various shoulder surgeries and leg surgeries. So I've got issues with circulation in my hands and my feet. So, that I question. Talking about earlier about me feeling like if I'm a good person, things like that, and I say there's a moving target, is now I look at Everest, it's a moving target. It's when I first had an opportunity to summit and I was successful, I'm like, I took a lot of, or some pride in it. Now I look back, I'm like, yeah, but I used oxygen. So does it really mean anything? So it's.
Another question to ask though, is it even worth the risk to try it without?
Yeah.
Again, no judgment either way. Those are just, I think, important questions you have to ask yourself.
And everybody's going to have a different answer.
Yeah.
But just, to finish off your question is, from a physical standpoint, I really enjoyed the climb. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a hell of an experience. The people that I was with were fantastic people. We got very close. I got to work with Sherpas for the first time, and those guys are just maniacs. And actually, there's a couple, female Sherpas that are working up there. It's very impressive to be around those types of people in general that have sacrificed the level that they have to be on that mountain. And that was a privilege to be around those people. The parts that I didn't enjoy was that it has become very commercialized in a sense that there are a lot of people there that shouldn't be there. They don't have the wherewithal physically to be there, and they kind of impair others. And also it's like everything is set up for you. Like everything's roped off, here's, the adventure element that I thought was going to be there really wasn't there. It was much more like just a very difficult, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but it's almost like a very difficult theme park, that as opposed to just being on a grand adventure, like you would think about these, like being lost in the Himalayas or, free climb the Himalayas. So, overall is a great experience, but there were certain negative elements that I didn't enjoy.
How long did you get to spend on top?
Maybe about 20 minutes. Something like that. And it was special. You're standing there and, but you've obviously had the chance to do a lot of things and accomplish a lot of things in your life, is that it never quite feels the way you think it's going to feel, regardless of what it is, at least what I've experienced sometimes. And sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's worse. Sometimes it's just different. And, when I was leading up to the top is I remember thinking, and this sounds corny to say, but I was kind of like, is my life about to change? Like I'm going to be a guy that summited Everest, and I don't know what that means, and we'll figure it out. And more than anything is I just I knew my dad was following me on my tracker, and I just wanted to make him proud. I just hoped that he was watching, saying, my son, did this, and that's what meant the most to me, at that point, and just to be at the top, and I just had so much gratitude, because I wasn't, even though I was there. With my climbing Sherpa is all the people that had come into place to help get me there. Yeah. And it basically just a way for me thanking them, for their work, giving me the ability, to be in that place.
Have you been able to land at a place where you realize your dad's going to be proud of you regardless of what you accomplish?
That's hard, man. Honestly, like even you saying that, it makes me, squirm inside. Because there's still, as much as I talk about, the entire book is about strength and surrender. And I've done so much work the past couple of years. I mean, so much just hard, lonely, painful work. And I'm in such a better place where now I can feel a full array of emotions. Is I can, give love, and I can feel fulfillment and contentment and, and joy and things like that. But it's one of the biggest things I still struggle with is receiving love. And just because there's something still inside of me that I have to battle through, saying, hey, it's okay, you deserve it. Because I question if we ever deserve anything, in life, period. But it's like, it's hard for me to say, your dad can be proud of you, or somebody can be proud of you, or somebody can love you. Because I'm like, I don't know if I've earned it. Yeah, and that's something
Do you
I
have
still
children of your
struggle
own?
with. Not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay. It's an interesting answer.
No.
It's and you know, there's an argument for kids. There's an argument against kids. It's having 3 of my own. You can be proud of accomplishments, and very disappointed in other accomplishments that they may do, but it doesn't change the amount you love them.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the things that I am still cognizant of to this day is I don't want my kids to ever compare themselves to me. I have made some unique life choices. I've had unique occupations. Some of my hobbies don't make sense to a lot of people, which I just feel like I'm surrounded by people who are boring. But to me, they make sense. But I don't ever want my kids to measure their life against my life because that comparison's the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And I don't care if my kids ever summit Everest or never even think of doing so. And I'm sure your dad's in the same boat. I mean, he's proud of you either way.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And it's, you know, because my dad came up in that era, you know, he was Vietnam, you know, he was in the Air Force and he's a tough guy, you know, and I look up to him and I admire him in so many different ways. You know, he's just always there for his family and a provider and a protector, you know, things like that. And it's that old school, you know, a handshake instead of a hug.
Yeah.
And there's no I love yous and things like that. But it's as I've gotten older, he now has told me a couple of times that he loved me, or he's told me a couple of times that he's proud of me.
You ever forced him to give you a hug?
Oh, I do it now.
Fuck yeah.
It's
Get
funny
right
to say
in his
that.
face.
Every time I see him now, for the past couple of years, as I go up and I grab him, I make him hug me.
Take pleasure in his uncomfortableness.
Yeah, or I'll call him just out of the blue, and I'll call him. He's like, "Yeah, what's going on?" I was like, "Hey, listen, I just wanted to call and tell you I love you." And thank you and Mom for everything you gave me and all this. And I can feel him just cringe on the other side of the phone. Yeah, I do it all the time.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly though, his life is probably enriched by you doing those things.
Yeah.
He fucking hates it, I guarantee you. And that's okay.
Yeah. But he has, he has said it is look, I love my dad tremendously. I look up to him. He's been a mentor of mine in many ways. And he has made it known that he's proud of me. But whenever he says that, there's a part of me that's just like, I don't feel that I've earned it. Like I feel like I should be doing even more to make him, you know, more proud. And I think there's a lot of negative elements to that I'm still working through. But I think there are certain positive elements to that because I'm not going to be complacent, you know, in what I'm doing. I know that he only has, you know, he doesn't have a whole lot of time left, and it's just that's why I want to do a lot of these things. You know, is try to make him proud.
So you get back from Everest. How soon, or was it on the freaking hike down where you're next? What am I
next?
Do?
Yeah, it's just exactly.
You hadn't even left Everest, had you?
Oh no. Well, because you know, before we even got started, so we were trying to do everything in a single year. It was a self-imposed 1 year because I'm like
about a 19-month calendar year.
Yeah, it was just I was like, listen, we're going to do all this shit in a year, and I talked to people about it. And it's funny is whenever I start to describe the project, whether it be to Eric or Monster that came on, or like different people, I'm like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, I'm going to climb the highest peak on each continent. And they're like, okay, good. I was like, then I'm going to go to the North Pole and the South Pole. They're like, okay. I'm like, then I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to do this. And they all looked like sharks where their eyes would roll in the back of their head and they would just glaze over and I'd lose them.
Yeah.
And it's because we were trying to do so much in such a small period of time. So it's like before we even got going we had everything, meticulously planned out. So when I got back from Everest, I was home for about 5 days. Went to Denali, the highest peak in the U.S., came back and then went almost straight to Kili in Africa, and then went to Elbrus, and then came back and had a couple weeks, and then went to the Mojave. And then after Mojave is when I was supposed to, I became the first person to go solo unsupported across Mojave and Death Valley, 213 miles. Then I was supposed to fly the plane around the world at that point, and then we lost the plane. Actually, we lost 2 planes at that point.
That sucks.
Yeah, it's you know how it is.
Hard to get in the first place and just gut wrenching.
And then you put all the logistics in place. You've got all the fuel set. You got all the things set up. Then you get a phone call, and you're like, plane's gone.
So when did you learn to fly though?
So that was during
likely a prerequisite for travel.
Yeah, it always helps.
Circumnavigate the
always
globe.
Helps. Yeah. I think of maybe 10 years ago. 12 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, about 12 years ago.
How current are you?
I'm still current,
Okay.
VFR, IFR. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also helps to probably survive the trip.
Yeah. But the problem is we were talking about this on the way over is that, I'm current, I'm like cusp current.
Yeah.
I maintain currency, but it's at just whatever I need to do to maintain currency.
Yeah. Your 3 takeoffs and landing in 90 days and the 3 instrument approaches or whatever it is, because I have an instrument rating, but I'm not current. That may not prepare you for the challenges of circumnavigating.
Exactly. So as I get up, I fly for a couple hours a month, and I'll go up, and I'll shoot my practice approaches and hold in VFR, VOR tracking, all that kind of stuff. But
that's not going to help when you can't find Iceland.
Exactly. So, but obviously, before all that is I was flying more and all the training and everything. But then that got canceled, and then.
You think that'll ever come back on?
I tell you, it will. Is that I'm talking to a couple guys now that have an interest in flying with me, who have different organizations as well. So I think we can kind of pair them together. Well,
let's do it in a helicopter.
Hey, I'd be totally on board with looking
done,
at that. Yeah,
but I bet you we can break the speed record.
Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to do originally was to try to. The problem is, and you know this with your flight pass, is that if you're breaking a fixed wing speed record, I mean, some of these guys are flying just prototypes, and these guys are peeing in buckets, and they've got just a flying gas.
I do
tank.
that just for fun. I mean,
that's a Tuesday.
Yeah, I got a bucket under here. Look, that's why I have this empty coffee cup.
But you can spend a lot of money trying to break the speed record in a fixed wing, but I wanted to do it in under 30 days, ideally like 2 weeks is what I was trying to do.
Can you imagine trying to break that speed record and doing that whole thing and not having a second to enjoy it?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Could you get attention from that? Sure. Could you do fundraising for that? Sure. Could you impact other people's lives? Yes. But fuck, you'd have such a limited memory of that because you'd be on the ragged edge of just being your ability to think. I'd almost rather want to go slower, document the whole thing, and celebrate it in a different way so it could be rewarding for the individuals involved as well.
It's interesting that you say that. So, and this is just kind of a quick sidebar. Is recently a couple months ago, is in May. I did a second full crossing of the Mojave, where it's just under 330 miles, 329 miles and change, and it was a new record for the fastest crossing of the Mojave on foot, and it was 7 days, 8 hours, and 45 minutes. But that's why I think I forgot to mention a little bit earlier. But I was moving for 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
No communications with anybody. I was sleeping for less than 3 hours a night.
Yeah, you're a wreck.
I mean, literally. Every single minute, every single second was accounted for. So as soon as I started this thing and I hit the timers and all the trackers, I mean, for the next 7 days, 8 hours, 45 minutes, there was no sitting there and enjoying it.
You're grinding.
You're grinding. I'm sitting there on a break. I'm eating. I'm like, I got 30 seconds. I got 10 seconds. I'm like, I'm moving. And then when I'm getting ready to go to bed, I'm like, cleaning my feet. I'm like, that's good enough because I only got 5 minutes to watch this or watch that. Or, it's like, and that it's just, and I haven't really talked about this before with anybody, but it's when you're pushing on these speed records, it's such a grind mentally, especially when you're going for over a week, something like that. So and if you're doing the fly around the world, you'd be a little over a week. And it's very taxing. And you look back on it and you can remember some things, you can't remember other things. And it's a completely different experience.
I'd rather do it in 3 weeks, document and I've been to Iceland and spent time there. Phenomenal country. And you're going to stop there, at least in Reykjavik, for gas.
Right.
But in a small plane or a helicopter, you're going to go probably northeastern Canada to Greenland to Iceland and then into Europe. That is like strikingly beautiful areas. To not have the ability to at least fuck about a little bit, I mean, come on.
Yeah. But it's why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
Are you doing it just for your own, kind of shits and giggles and set a record? Or are you doing it to get, say, attention and generate resources, for a cause?
Yeah.
And I think if you're going to do like that, then it is probably better to slow down.
Yeah.
And maybe you can stop somewhere and do like a talk or, meet.
You can increase safety margin as well.
Exactly. There's a lot of different ways. So I think it comes down to what's your ultimate goal? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And then, that kind of leads in, that can kind of back into it. But that being said, look, I would love to figure out a way to do something with you on, whether it be fixed wing or whether it be, rotary or, something like that could be a lot of fun.
Anybody can do it in fixed wing.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're going to be gliding half the way anyway. Yeah.
You could, technically. Rotary would be challenging because there's some big hops you'd have to make, and they just don't have the distance.
Yeah.
You're going to have some altitude requirements and restrictions. You're going to have to go around stuff. You might be able to go under some weather. But yeah, that would be a completely different challenge. But you can also land wherever you want to.
Yeah, and that's the big thing now that Russia's shut down. Like if you're coming back, Northern Pacific, is before you'd hit Russia once or twice before you came over, made the jump to Alaska. Now you can't do that.
I think they'd let us in.
Yeah, you might be able to get in, but it's getting out. It's going to be the potential issue.
It's the worst that could happen, right?
You're right. Just Russia.
Yeah. We had a helicopter. It's now got rockets attached to it.
Yeah.
And that would be.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had all those plans. You did Everest. You came back. You started doing those other things.
Right.
Where did the row across the Atlantic come in?
Yeah, so the row came in, and that was January 31st, 2021 through March something 21. So it was 53 days.
That's a long time out in the old blue.
It was on a 21-foot boat. Yeah.
I mean, what's that like?
The best way I can think to describe it is impressively uncomfortable. And look, I know that you've done, and honestly, look, I think the things that you've been through are a lot more difficult than a lot of things that I've been through. But I know
Comparison is the thief of joy.
But it's a matter of you. I know you've been there. Is that when things are so uncomfortable, you actually kind of disconnect from yourself and you're like, Jesus, like this is like so uncomfortable. I mean, it's like impressive. It's I'm so uncomfortable right now. And when I got to the row, the plan was, I was like, if I can just make it there, having been successful on all these expeditions, I think it was I should know this, is either the 9th or 10th expedition. I was like, even to get there, going through COVID, going through all this kind of stuff, it's going to be a borderline miracle.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I get there, I'm just going to get in that boat. I'm going to point it west, and I'm going to row until that boat sinks or I fall out or I hit land. And I'm just going to shut the fuck up and just work. And that's what it turned into. Like I spent zero time preparing for it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did you just live on a Concept 2 rower before that?
Zero. I would row periodically for like, an hour or two, just as part of like general conditioning.
Yeah.
And I went down to, there was a group that was at Marina Del Rey in LA. And it was like a row group for girls. And I called them up and I was like, listen, I'm a rower across the Atlantic. I have no idea what I'm doing. They're like, well, come down and we'll show you a basic technique. I was on this little, fake erg for 30, 45 minutes. I never even, left the dock. And I was like, that was my extent of practicing for this row.
And you somehow got sponsors to pay for this?
Yeah. Yeah, man.
All right. We got to talk about sales tactics because I need to learn the magic of.
It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Yeah.
All right. So you get on this boat. At what point in time after starting this journey did you realize that perhaps this was a bad idea?
I'd say about 3 hours in.
Okay, so you could probably still see land.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So it was myself and a partner, Patrick Favre, who's an awesome guy, and we got out there, and we're 3 hours in, and I'm feeling great, like no seasickness, and we had pretty rough seas. I'm chilling. And he's like, well, some small percentage of people don't experience seasickness. He's like, maybe that's who you are. I'm like, I'm Christopher Columbus out here. Like I can do this. And I'm sitting there eating in the cabin while he's rowing. And then all of a sudden, man, I was like, and I burst out of the cabin. I shove him to the left and I puke right over his shoulder. I mean, it's all over the deck and I'm just heaving and he just starts laughing. And I'm telling you, is I know you've experienced, seasickness.
It's the worst.
It's for the next 3 days.
Yeah. It doesn't leave you.
If I wasn't rowing, and I was still rowing 12 hours a day, there's no bullshit like, oh, you don't feel good, you can skip this. So I was rowing 12 hours a day. And if I wasn't rowing, I was laying down with my eyes closed. Because if I opened my eyes, if I sat up, if I had a sip of water, I would throw up. So there was no food and water for 3 days, rowing 12 hours a day. And then finally, after a couple of days, I could drink some water, then I could eat like a protein shake, then and then I finally kind of got into it. But it was just a work. It's just like I'm just going to get on here and just work. And like it's the thing is you'd row in one position that the deck is only 9 feet long. So if you weren't rowing, the little cabin that we would live in it was 4 by 4 by 4. So I mean, this thing is tiny. And if you wanted to lay down, you would lay down and put your legs down this center kind of crawl way underneath the guy rowing. So you're laying like this, and this guy's like he's rowing right here.
You just can't escape it.
It's like right here. And you're inside this little fiberglass capsule, and the noise is just always the waves hitting this thing. It never stops, and it's always rocking. And it's wet in there, then it's hot and it's muggy. And then like we'd open the hatch and he would try to jump in fast and I'd try switch positions. And sometimes we'd mistime it and a wave would just dunk all this water in. So I'm like, I'm getting out. I'm like, I'm dry. I'm ready to go. And all of a sudden just, 50 gallons of water. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, now the cabin's flooded. All my stuff's wet. I'm wet. And now I got to row for 4 hours. And it was impressively uncomfortable. And about something like a weekend is our water maker broke. So we had an automatic water maker on there. We just
desalinator.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You just flip a button and you get, we were going through like 10 liters a day, something like that.
Yeah.
And it would take maybe 5 minutes to fill up 10 liters. And like you didn't have to do anything. And all of a sudden one day, we go to start it and there's nothing. And I'm like, what the hell? And we can't fix it. And we had to pull out our backup, and our backup was a manual pump that was affixed to this wooden board, like a sheet that was maybe 2 feet by 3 feet with a pump on it. And we dragged 2 hoses behind the boat. And you'd have to sit there and pump this thing like this for 3 hours to get the water that you needed. So we went from 5 minutes of doing nothing to 3 hours of nonstop pumping to get the water we needed. And it took us almost a week to finally get that thing fixed. And turns out it was like a little $4 part, like a little relay switch. And luckily we had one and plugged that thing back in. But the thought, as I was already so uncomfortable, and then I'm like, now I got to pump this damn pump for 3 hours a day. I was like, it puts you on the verge of this is just turned into like a nightmare.
What's the first thing you did when you got to shore on the other side of the Atlantic?
First thing I did was get back on the boat. and I mean that, and you probably experienced this with what you went through, is that there's seasickness and then there's land sickness, when you get back on. And I was so used to being on this 21-foot boat and rocking. I'm like, oh, this is, you get comfortable. And we got to land. I got off on land, and I'm walking like I'm just drunk. I'm walking into stuff. I'm falling over, and I get really nauseous. So after about 3 minutes, I get right back on the boat, and I just stay on the boat for a couple hours. I'm like, I'm like, screw this land thing. I'm like, I'm a seaman now.
What was the first meal you had?
An apple. I wanted some fresh fruit.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were you guys mostly surviving on food-wise?
It was, it's as you expect. It was, freeze-dried meals. And then I had, I brought, a bunch of protein shake, I had brought like, pounds of just protein mix.
Yeah.
That and then beef jerky.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, probably from a space-saving perspective, the way to go.
And I think I ended up eating like 350 of the freeze pack, foods. Like I was going through just mowing these things. And the funny thing is that we brought like a jet bowl, to boil the water to have the hot food and everything. And after, the first 3 days of trying to eat and sitting there lighting this thing and having a jet bowl on a choppy ocean, I was like,
just ate them cold.
I was like, this is stupid. Yeah. So I was like, if I'm going to eat at 5 p.m., I was like, I would fill my water in my one at 1 and just let it sit there.
Yeah.
And so for 53 days, I just ate cold food and just, beef jerky and protein shakes.
Then an apple.
Yeah.
When did Antarctica occur in this?
Antarctica was just before the row.
Okay.
So as I'd gone down, so I went down to Antarctica for, I was fortunate enough to be down there for a month. On the ice. So went down there, climbed Vinson, and then went to the South Pole.
So you probably went through ALE as
exactly.
well.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about base camp and
Mike
about
is
Glacier.
The most interesting dude alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. McDowell is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we shared some of the same space there. There was people who were. There's another base camp out at Vincent, right? They fly you out there.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
but then you skied, right, to the South Pole?
So the way it works is if you're doing the South Pole, there's different ways you can do it. So I did what's called the last degree.
Okay.
So I went from the 89th parallel to the pole. So it's 69 statute miles. You can do a full crossing. There's different inlets where you can start. You can do like a Messner start or a Hercules start, or you can start, on the Weddell Sea or Ross. Like there's a lot of different ways you can do it.
Yeah.
So I did what's called the last degree. So we flew from Union Glacier, from the camp where you were as well, out past Thiel's Corner, got some fuel there, which is, I think, the most remote airstrip in the world. You land out in the middle of nowhere. There's a building where there's a bathroom and a couple 50-gallon drums of fuel in the snow.
I mean, what else do you need?
Yeah, right. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And then we flew out to the 89th parallel, got dropped off, and then it's so interesting to get dropped off in Antarctica, and the plane flies away, and you're looking around. And there's a small station at the South Pole, which is basically 70 miles away. But other than that, it could be hundreds or thousands of miles, and there is nothing, man.
Yep.
And besides like some fungi and maybe like a roundworm or something, like there's no life. Like
there's no insects.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing. And I think what I've said about skiing to the pole, it's like, if you want to get an idea for it, is get on a treadmill, go on a freezer that's 30 or 40 below, and put it right in front of a white wall and do that for about 12 hours a day. And that's basically what it is. I mean, you're looking around, it is just a bunch of flat, white, nothing.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. I laugh when people talk about colonizing Mars. I'm like, you want to colonize Mars? Go down to Antarctica just for a little while and tell me what you think about that. It's different.
I would want to be on the 5th or 6th wave.
Yeah, it's just like when you get in these places that are so inhospitable, where it can be 30, 40 below, and even worse, and then it can change. And I know you've been through this with what you've experienced. Is it can change so quickly to where you could be skiing, it could be 20 below, but you're damn near sweating, or you are sweating, and now you're stripping off layers, and you're doing this and this, and you're trying to not get cold, because if you get cold, you can get like some serious issues.
But if you sweat, you can get some serious issues.
Exactly. It's like you have to walk this line.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, like you're stripping something off, and then all of a sudden, one cloud comes, and then now you're just racing to put everything back on before you get severe frostbite. And you could get frostbite in 30 seconds, something like that.
So then what did you do up at the North Pole? Was it something similar?
The only thing I've done at the North Pole so far is sit in Krasnoyarsk, Russia for 2 weeks. And what I mean by that is that the North Pole has been canceled every year since 2019 or 20. Because
who gets to cancel the North Pole here?
Is
this a Santa Claus thing?
Exactly.
Or what do we got going on?
It's tough. Is that no one technically controls the North Pole?
Yeah.
And normally the way you'd get to the pole typically was through Norway. Okay. But then all the people on the ground, the staffers, things like that, were Russian staffers. And then Norway and Russia starting having some issues over various things, and it's either 2019, 2020. I'm blanking now.
Do they have a station up there similar to the Murdoch
No,
station?
no, there's nothing like that.
Okay,
yeah, because is where the North Pole is very different than the South Pole is there is no land at the North Pole. It's just floating pack ice.
Okay,
so the only way that you can get to typically the only way you get to the North Pole is about a 3 or 4 week period every April, and that's it. Some people have tried to get there during the winter, like on a solo trip or like 2 people. And sometimes
like I've seen some of those. They're getting into the sled that they're following or dragging behind them, which is a boat.
Exactly. It's different things.
Fuck.
And now, and before you had a couple people that would go up and pick you up in off-season attempts, things like that. And now nobody does it anymore. So unless you're going during season attempts, more than likely you just can't do it anymore for various reasons, plus ice conditions, things like that.
Yeah.
So basically, since that time I've been scheduled to go to the pole 4 or 5 different times, and it's gotten canceled every single time. And normally it's within like a week notice or 2 weeks notice.
Sucks.
And that's the hard part is that, when I found out in 2022, when I was running across the Atlantic, we were halfway across the Atlantic when I got the phone call, over my satellite phone, that Russia went into Ukraine and the pole was canceled. And we were on track to do everything. Like nobody believed we could, very few people believed we could do it. We were on track to do everything successfully the first time, all this kind of stuff. Like everything was coming together. And to get that news that everything I'd worked for years and all the sacrifices and all the money and all the people. So it wasn't just about me. It's like so many people put their efforts into this, and that we lost it I went into just a spiral. For a couple of days where I'm like, I let everybody down. I failed this. I was like, I didn't care that I'd been 100% successful to that point. And I internalized everything. Like, even though it was outside of my control, it was outside of my control that, that Russia went in. I was like, I should have still been able to find a way to work around it, and I couldn't. So therefore, I'm a failure, and I've let everybody down.
Yeah, how could you not solve that problem
exactly.
on a remote boat with a satellite communicator and no understanding of what's going on in the world? What a piece of shit.
I understand. On a certain level. Yeah. On a rational level, but just internally with how I process things and how I internalize things, I sat there. I'm like, you piece of shit failure. You let all these people down. You couldn't find a way to get the pole. I don't care. I hate when people tell me stories. They're like, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm like, did that happen? They're like, well, here's why it didn't happen. Yep. That drives me up a wall. I even got on my finger here is NFS for no fucking stories. It drives me up a wall. And I felt like I was starting to tell people stories. I was like, well, we didn't accomplish it because Putin goes into Ukraine and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I should have been able to find a way. And that was something that was hard to deal with, for a while.
Sometimes life doesn't let you find a way.
I'm sorry that I kind of got sidebarred there, but that leads back to this past year is that we finally got that we're going to have a chance for the pole again.
What are you going to do with the North Pole?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I'll get dropped off at the 89th parallel, finish ski in, and then get picked up. But this past year is in March. I flew into Russia. So I flew into Krasnoyarsk, which is in Siberia. It's the absolute very center of Russia. And we sat there for 2 weeks. And we were supposed to go up, and at the last minute, there's a crack that developed in the ice that was so big they couldn't fix it. And they decided to cancel the season after sitting in Russia for 2 weeks.
Shit.
Yeah.
You going back in 25?
Going back, yeah, already scheduled. Yeah. It's one of these things just like, I don't care, 25 or 21, 25.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get it done with that level of relentlessness for sure. So, okay, you got the North Pole still outstanding. What else do you have that you're trying to accomplish? Circumnavigation at some point. We'll figure out a way to do it in a helicopter, obviously. What else? What else are you thinking?
For Project 7 for Soldiers, our inaugural project is that's going to be the end of it.
Okay.
Is that the
pole is the end of it?
The pole is going to be the end of it.
Okay.
Exactly. But then if we can figure out a way to get around the world, preferably in a helicopter,
it would be cool to have that one project that you completed. There's a way that you could ideate those things along.
Exactly. Is that we could kind of bring it back in and kind of restart it for a second, or there's different ways that we could figure it out. But for the entirety of 7 for Soldiers, the North Pole is going to be the end of it. And then now I'm just kind of figuring out the next expeditions that I kind of want to put together. And I've got just a bunch of ideas, and now it's kind of prioritizing which way I want to go about them, and what I want to pursue first. Cause it's, I'd love to do like a longer row, maybe something across the Pacific. But that could be 250, 300 days, something like that. And the challenge is it's going to be a long one. But if you want to climb, another 8,000 meter mountain, you don't sit on the Pacific for 300 days and then start training for a mountain. You do the mountain first, obviously, then go across the Pacific. So I'm trying to figure out, how to stage the things that I'm looking at doing next.
So the things you're looking at doing next, do they seem to be individual, or are you going to try to chain some things together?
That's a good question. I don't even have a great answer at this point. They're going to be more individualized unless it's something like going after all the 8,000 meter peaks, which there are 14 of them. Mm-hmm. So I've knocked out, obviously one of them, there's 13 to go, is that those would be individual mountains, but collectively they would be 8,000 meter peaks. So I'm just trying to figure out, kind of what the objective is and kind of how I want to kind of weave them together or have them stand independently.
How do you get a brand like Monster to bite on something like this? Because they get pitch shit
all the time.
I was going to say every day, but realistically, it's probably every hour.
Dozens of times a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you, and I appreciate you asking that, is Monster has been just a tremendous partner for us. Is that, we were trying to get in touch with them for years. And we had no idea, who was there. We didn't know anybody. So it's like cold calls and emails. And we walked through the front door.
1-800-MONSTER.
Yeah.
Hello.
We walked through the front door like everybody else. Hello, Miss So-and-so. My name is, whatever. And so they didn't know me from Adam. And at the time I'd never done anything. There were no records, there were no climbs, there was nothing. I've barely done anything now, but this was even worse. Is that we finally, got a phone call, and I was basically, sending out a cold email to him, to Darlene Bartlett, and sent it in to her, and she's like, listen, the CFO, Dan McHugh, wants to have a phone call. And I was like, did she send this to the right person? I'm like, what? I was like, I can't be reading. Like, what's going on here? So we organized a call with Dan, and I'm telling you, the first 5 minutes of talking to Dan, I was like, I felt like I'd known him 20 years. He treated me just with such just grace and friendship and camaraderie. He's like, I see it. He's like, I see what you're doing. I see why you're doing it. And he's like, we want to be a part of it.
How do you think that you separated yourself from the other messages that got headed in that direction?
That's a great question. And I think about that because, I think about the success we've had with Monster. And then I think about why other people and even smaller brands have turned us down.
Yeah.
Not even return phone calls or emails or, so
happens all the time to people every day.
It's I think you have to be authentic. is I think a lot of times when you're trying to get money, you're trying to get resources from people have a tendency just to say whatever they feel they need to say in order to get whatever they're trying to get. But that can only play for so long. And I think it's just, you got to be as authentic as possible. And then sometimes there's something about that message that just resonates with somebody. And I wish I had a better answer, but that's really all I've come up with, is that I think, Dan saw that, he heard the passion in my voice, and I told him I was going to dedicate everything, that I had or was to this thing, and 100% of the net proceeds are benefiting somebody else. So I wasn't in it, just for direct, personal gains. And a lot of it was, while we were doing what we were doing. And a lot of people don't realize, but Monster does a lot of stuff on a philanthropic level, but the way they normally work is they don't put their name on any of it. Is they're writing checks, they're organizing things, they're doing all this kind of stuff, especially for veterans. Like, they do a lot of stuff that they simply don't promote. And, but we hit it off with them. And a couple weeks later I went down, and Dan and I had breakfast together in San Clemente, and just got kicked off. And they have been by far our biggest supporter, on the entire project. And it's just been a tremendous, honor to work with them. And it's been just a great family. Cause when you see Monster, it's, Monster has a certain reputation and a certain branding and a certain style and things like that. But I'm telling you, once you get in there, there's such a passionate group of people. They're just awesome people to work with. They care about philanthropic endeavors. They care about veterans. It's just been, we couldn't have asked for a better partner.
How will you know when you're done?
On like a personal level?
Yeah, with setting records, pushing yourself to that level.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever be done. And I don't mean that from a record setting standpoint. It's in me where, and I think it's in all of us, just to varying degrees and showcases itself in various ways, is that there's something inside of me that I have to get out of me. And there's a great quote in the Bible, and just to paraphrase it is, if you let out what's inside of you will save you. If you don't let out what's inside of you will destroy you. And I've been in that place, we talked about earlier, for so many decades of not letting that thing out, not working to get that thing out. And I felt it destroying me in a variety of ways. And now that I kind of figured it out a little bit, and I'm continuing to figure it out on a daily basis, I'm just always striving to try to get that thing out of me, whatever it is. But that doesn't necessitate me setting records or me doing things in a public forum or anything like that. It could be something that's totally personalized, that I never promote, that I never do anything. But I think that'll always be a part of I don't think we ever truly get everything out of us. But I think it's always a continuous quest to try to get everything out of us.
I'm not even sure most people even try.
That's an unfortunate statement that I can probably agree with. Yeah. I think that, the question is, you hear all these things about, the secret or the secret to life or the this or that, or, why we're here and this and that. And, and look, I don't know my ass from a hole in the ground, in a lot of things.
I know the difference between those two. I don't know a lot, but
but it's, well, look, what I've figured out, for me, is that we're here for two reasons, and it's growth. Number one is growth. And second is you take that growth and you apply it to elevate others. And that's it. I don't care whatever else you do, everything we do. I'm not here to be happy. I'm not here to screw around it's like, I'm here to grow and use that growth to elevate others.
You think you can do both? Be happy and grow and use that growth to elevate others?
This is not to sound, it's a great question. And this is not to sound dramatic. Happiness doesn't factor into my life. I never use the term happy. I never think about, am I happy? Like do
you want it to?
I question that, but is what I look at is contentment. It's like, am I content with who I am? Mm-hmm. Am I content with my performance? Do I feel fulfilled in my endeavors and with my achievements? So it's really contentment and fulfillment are the things that I look for over happiness.
Some people might define that as happiness. It could be just an issue of vernacular.
Exactly. And I'm not trying to play I'm not trying to play a game of semantics, but it's just, I think, too often we get caught, especially today, because we've got this, like Michael Easter talks about, this comfort crisis, this level of comfort we're looking for, and we're looking for ease and happiness in our lives all the time. And so I think the term happiness has kind of gotten convoluted or misconstrued in certain ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's just like, oh, I just want to be happy. I just want things to be easy. I just want to enjoy life. and I don't look at it that way. But to be honest with you, I don't know if I will ever be happy. It's just there's things that I'm working through, and that I'm working for. But as I try to be again, fulfilled and content, and things like that.
Are you happy when you're suffering during these expeditions?
I would say is I enjoy it, and I don't know if that's the same as happiness.
I don't either.
Yeah, but I enjoy it. But this is not a game of semantic, a word game or whatever. Yeah. What I was getting at is I don't look at this stuff as suffering. And I know I keep drawing a lot of parallels to you because look, I have a tremendous amount of respect for things that that you did in your former life.
I could have taught a monkey to do everything I've done in my life. I'm not
you're
joking.
You're always very humble about it, and I appreciate it. But honestly, when I look at say, trekking days, over a week across the Mojave alone, and rowing the ocean, like doing it, and whatever, that's not suffering, and it doesn't suck. It's difficult, and I want to do it because it's difficult. Because, like I said earlier, is that even though we live in the margins, or even though we live kind of in this down the center of the fairway, that's not really where you're learning as much as you can, or the real stuff about yourself. We learn about ourselves in the margins. When you're operating and it's sunny and it's 70 degrees and you're safe and comfortable, and you just had an MRE or a freeze pack meal, that's one thing. When it's 3 a.m. and you're cold and tired and wet and alone, that's a different thing. That's when you really learn about yourself. And that's what interests me, and that's what drives me. So, I say that is the things that, that other people have faced, whether it's, the things, like losing somebody in combat, working as slave labor in a diamond mine somewhere, being in a concentration camp, getting a phone call that the person that you love has a terminal illness, like that suffering. Going across the Mojave, in 7 days is not suffering. It's difficult. And that's why I draw that distinction in my mind. And I'm doing these things not to suffer, but to put myself in difficult situations, to learn about myself, and then to exemplify to others, hey, if this old fat guy can do this, imagine what you can do. And just to exemplify that we're all capable of so much more. And I know you learn this as well, is where we think our limits are, we think they're like these solid walls and we're going to get there and we can't go around them, or we can't go through them or over them. You get there and it's a cloud most of the time. You're like, holy shit, I thought this was my limit. Then you're like, oh, maybe it's over there. And you get over there and you're like, it's not here. Maybe it's like we're capable of so much more than we realize. And you can't explore that unless you push yourself to those levels.
You have to get out of the world of glorious excess that most people live in, which most people don't want to do. And what you were just saying, were you using yourself as the example of the fat old guy?
Yeah.
We need to talk about how you view yourself. Michael, would you describe him as the fat old guy?
Not fat, definitely.
Well, like it's like
there's a lot of power and positive self-talk. We might want to reframe on how we look at ourselves.
Yeah, it's endurance and adventure stuff is not an old man's game. To get started in this at 40. Versus these guys that are doing this stuff at 25. It's just it's a different world. It's different.
Yeah, but there's a reason in competitive sports that they have age brackets and experience brackets and all of those things. Again, at 40, be cautious comparing yourself to a 25-year-old.
It's tough, man.
It gets really tough for them when they need wisdom and experience.
Yeah.
And they don't have it, and you do. You know what I mean? The scales tip depending on what is being required of you.
Yeah.
The two buckets of knowledge and luck. And you have to really pull from the luck one until you have the knowledge and experience and balance it out. I mean, pros and cons to everything.
Yeah, but I tell you, it's been interesting. It's been interesting, especially to your point, it's just started at this age. Because look, if I were to start this when I was younger, I wouldn't have been doing the same things for the same reasons. And it's there are parts of me that look back on my journey and wish that I'd started it sooner, or wish this or wish that, but it's just, I wouldn't be who I am and I wouldn't be where I am. So I look back just with, more gratitude, or with gratitude, and to say it's maybe not what I would have planned, if I had the choice, but I am where I am. And I've never been more fulfilled. I've never felt more connected to others. I've never felt more of service to others. I've never felt, I've had a more purposeful existence.
You're threatening to be happy.
Ugh, don't say that. Okay.
Has anybody ever pitched you on an expedition idea where you thought about it and then said, fuck that?
Not at this point, man. Not at this
Not
point.
like a homemade submarine where you have to like leg paddle that thing through the Atlantic. Would you be in on that?
I tell you, I've gotten some. I've gotten a couple offers on different things, but I want to start pushing myself in different areas.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to figuring out what that means. And at this point, I don't know what it means. Which is kind of exciting. It's kind of irritating, but still kind of exciting at the same time.
And everything you've done, what do you consider to be the most challenging thing you've done in your life?
Besides this podcast?
Oh, this shit's easy.
Anything. I'd say really it's I'll give you just two quick ones. And, one is from an expedition standpoint, probably the Mojave crossing of 29 miles and change.
Is it just the grind and
it
the
was
environmental?
It was just the grind. It was, and like, I'm still learning, to do, all this kind of stuff. And so I don't have, the systems in place that some people do and things like that. And for example, after a couple of days in, I mean, my groin just absolutely exploded. It was so raw. I mean, it was so painful. And I'm sitting there, and just tucking things here and putting it there, just trying to have some type of comfort. And I mean, I've got blood and pus oozing down both legs. I mean, I'm sure you went through the same thing and a lot of stuff you've done. And it was so painful. And my feet are just blistered up, and I'm just walking. I just feel my feet just squishing around and all this kind of stuff. And everything is just seized up. Like when I start moving, I was trying to maintain a certain speed. Yeah. And then when I'd start moving, I was walking like a half a mile an hour, like literally a half a mile an hour. I looked like Igor. And I'd go sideways sometimes. I'd go forward. I'd go backwards. Like whatever I could do to move in that direction. Yeah, totally. I was pushing the cart. I was pulling it. Like it was just bad. And it was just that never ending grind. In the last 72 miles was a 36-hour straight push with no sleep, very little rest, very few breaks, all that kind of stuff. So from a physical standpoint, that was probably it. But from a greater perspective, it was just staying in this for so long, since 2018. And there were so many times, we talked about perceived limits earlier. Mm-hmm. There were so many times when I thought I was at my physical, psychological, emotional limits. And I'm like, I'm all in. Like I'm putting all the chips on the table. I'm all in. And the universe would say, you got to find a way to put more on the table if you want to continue. Like you got to find out, more sponsor money. You got to find a way to get to Russia. You got to find a way you got to do more. And I would sit back and I'd say, I can't. I'm like, I'm all in. I have nothing left to give. And the universe would say to me, that's your problem, not mine. If you want to continue, you've got to find a way to grow as a person and find some way to go more into this project. And that happened time and time and time again. And I can't tell you all the nights I'd lay there alone in bed and just thinking about my mind just racing, or I'd wake up at 3:00 in the morning thinking about this stuff. About I've got to find a way to do more. I've got to find a way to find more money. I've got to find a way to get it here. I've got to find a way to make, it's like, it's just continuously being forced to go more and more, to give more of yourself to something was probably the greatest challenge, that's happened since starting the project.
Out of all the things you've done and we've talked about, none of the physical stuff I consider to be impressive, to be honest.
Yeah.
The most impressive thing you've talked about is your willingness and ability to get out of bed when you didn't think you could. That to me is, I think, the most impressive thing you've done. Yeah. You changed your mindset and you changed who you were and you realized where you were and you didn't want to be there anymore and you did something about it. I mean, all the stuff that you're doing for other people, that's fantastic stuff, but how many people do we both know that if they get to that low point, they can't find their way out of it? And it sucks.
Yeah.
And I've had plenty of friends who made the decision to end it at that point. And it says a lot about you that you went the opposite direction from that and made something out of it.
Now, look, I appreciate you saying that. And I would wholeheartedly agree with you. The physical expeditions have been a big challenge, and all the training and look, it's, surgeries and frostbite and, injuries and, and sacrifices and all that. But it is, you're right, is that stuff pales in comparison to the other stuff that I faced. But again, I'm not prioritizing myself here. It's that we all face, You know what I mean? And when we're in those dark places, I think that's one reason that a lot of people can't, or it's not that they can't, they choose not to get out of bed, or they choose not to show up at the starting line, is because we feel that we're uniquely alone in our suffering or our perceived suffering. And we don't have the proper perspective. And that's two of the greatest things I've learned from this project is appreciation and perspective. And with the proper appreciation and perspective, life is nearly limitless, and our capabilities are nearly limitless. And when you sit there, it's like, I don't care what I've been through. Millions of people have been through it millions of times, as I said earlier, or even worse, millions of times. Even though our suffering hurts, our pain hurts, there's nothing unique about it. There's nothing special about it. And when we understand that and we have that level of connection to say, hey, other people have overcome this, I think it creates that level of perspective that enables us to get out of bed. I know you've talked about say buds, and that no one particular evolution or day was that challenging.
Yeah.
But it's showing up again and again and again.
Totality.
And you talk about it's like kind of rubbing your knuckles on a cheese grater, I think you mentioned.
Or sandpaper, yes.
It's that. It's just
once is easy. 180 days in a row with a little bit different story.
Exactly. And that's what it is. It's just showing up every single day.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a challenge that I think a lot of people face. And I'm glad you mentioned it. That's one of the biggest things, you know, that I talk about, you know, in the book, and I'm trying to get the message across is, even if you don't care about all the physical challenges, that's not what the story is about. Those are elements of the story. And if you want to hear about the mountain was this high and it was 20 degrees below zero and the pack weighed 80 pounds, like all that stuff's in there. Like all that story's in there. But it's a story about evolution and redemption and finding purpose and overcoming pain and dealing with all these things that we all deal with. And I'm just trying to get people to understand that we all deal with this and not to feel alone and lost and segregated and isolated in that pain.
Did you find it hard to write?
Actually, I don't think that it was.
How'd you tackle it? Would you write just when you were inspired, or did you put yourself on a schedule?
Yeah, no, it was funny is that, so I originally I hired a woman that I ended up working with as my editor, who I thought was going to be the ghostwriter for the book. And I had written like all these personal journals on the expeditions that originally I never thought would be published. Like these are included, a couple of them are included in the book. These are like very raw, personal, intimate, like, you know, personal journals. So I sent those to her. And I had written probably about 150 pages of just like notes and stream of consciousness and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I'm just going to give all this stuff to her. Then we're going to have 2 or 3 phone calls and
make something of this.
Exactly. I'm like, here it is. You send me a book in a week, you know, a couple of weeks, and I'm an author.
Yeah.
And she sent me back, you know, kind of 2 or 3 paragraphs, the first draft of 2 or 3 paragraphs. And I looked at it, I was like, I got to write a book. I'm like, this isn't going to work. Because it wasn't my voice. And she's a very skilled, successful author, but it wasn't my story. It wasn't my voice. It didn't have, you know, that. I'm like, I got to write a book. And this thing ended up being originally like 92,000 words. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, we got it down to 83,000. But to your point is I would sit down every single day, whether I was inspired or not, and just start writing, because I was still training full time. I was still running, you know, managing the organization, you know, doing the Mojave, like doing all this stuff. So I couldn't sit back and wait for the inspiration to hit me. It's just, you got to just, you know, we were talking about earlier, is I would just grind on it until.
Did you set a word goal for the day or a time?
No, I would just get to a place where I could feel where I was starting to kind of tail off.
Yeah.
And sometimes I could get through a chapter. Sometimes I'd get through 2 pages. I'm just like, I could just feel,
yep.
You know, these things, I'm like, I'm forcing it right now.
Yeah, just put it down.
Exactly. I had to put it down and walk away from it. Other times I'd sit down, I'm like, but yeah, as people or a lot of people have asked if I felt it was kind of cathartic, mm-hmm. you know, to write it and everything. And honestly, it wasn't. There was nothing, I didn't have any of these big revelations about it. I didn't have, you know, any of that stuff as I was kind of reliving it and going through it. Because a lot of this stuff is, once I did it, I kind of moved on from it and wasn't really, you know, going back on it and reliving it. But it was just very kind of more, you know, matter of fact of, you know, kind of what I learned, what I experienced, you know, that kind of thing.
You think you'll write another one?
Yeah.
What's it going to be about?
Well, I've got an idea now, is that with the crossing of the Mojave, is I want to take that as an isolated event, you know, which obviously it was, and I've got a couple ideas about different things that people are seeking in today's society that I feel are likely leading to dissatisfaction with their lives. and then to use that in tandem with the story of the Mojave Crossing, to where there's kind of like parallels and kind of take you into the story, out of the story, and things that I experienced with what I see kind of trend lines I'm seeing that people are using that I think are leading to dissatisfaction.
You saying that makes me think about what we started the conversation with, your banking job. How many times have you seen people from an economic perspective, they have enough money they can do whatever the fuck they want to do, but are just hollow and unhappy inside?
A lot.
How did that become the goal for everybody?
Well, you know,
you've seen the end state, and I've seen it too. People who, they could drop $1 million, and I don't even know if it means to them, if they even notice it. And they have everything, multiples of everything, but they're not happy. How the fuck did that become the goal for everybody?
It's a good question, man. And I've seen it both. I've seen it through banking, where we've sold companies and someone gets a check for $100 million. And I talk to them 2 months later and they're miserable. They're like, I don't know what to do.
That seems, to most people, that would sound unfathomable.
Exactly. It's just, and it talks about it's like kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you have that kind of that base net, now you need different things. Is that, you can keep the lights on, you can have your turkey sandwich wherever you want it, or water, whatever it is. But if you don't have that greater level of these other things that we need, I've seen people a lot of money here saying, be miserable. I know, look, personally, years ago, maybe, 8-10 years ago, I was in Saint-Tropez with a buddy, and we're on this big yacht.
It's in Georgia, right?
Yeah. Southern Georgia. Yeah.
It's in the Gulf.
But we're in, and I think about this story from time to time, is that we're in Saint-Tropez. It's 2-3 o'clock in the morning. We're on some big ass yacht there in the harbor, and there's just, everybody's drinking, and there's drugs, and there's good looking people, and there's music going, and all this kind of stuff. And this thing is, there's a lot of money, in this place. And I'm looking around and I'm like, I'm absolutely miserable right now. I'm like, these people suck. I'm like, this energy sucks. I'm like, these people are these are just not people that you want to be around. And I don't care how much money you have. And I think you kind of, once you've kind of seen this stuff enough, and you understand is I'd rather be living in a 1-bedroom, here in Kalispell, driving some $3,000 truck than in the biggest house in Beverly Hills, driving whatever, but not living that lifestyle. I'm not living in the genuine way that I need to be living. Yeah. Cause it's like, once you've seen there and you've been around it and seen it, I know you've had the opportunity to see a lot of it. It's not what you think it is, and it
doesn't solve any problems.
It doesn't, man. It doesn't. It's like, I remember it's like the first time I went to Vegas when I was like 20, 21, I was like, oh man, this is Vegas. Like, I'm here. And I remember walking, I think we were in Caesars or something. I walk up and there's a gold column. I'm looking at it, I'm like, this piece of shit plastic column is spray painted gold. And I know that sounds stupid and it's a simple story, but it had such a profound impact on me. I'm like, this isn't real. Like, none of this is real. Like, obviously, the money and means and resources, those can be very real things. But for the most part, once you have a very basic necessity list met, the rest of the stuff, I think if you're if you're living in the right way for the right reasons, it doesn't get tied into that. It's more, outside of that, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's, I don't know how we change that value system. And don't get me wrong, I like nice shit. Everybody likes nice shit. Mm-hmm. I think you get lost in the pursuit of the nice stuff. I think you lose who you are, or you think that thing is going to change who you are, and it just doesn't. Yeah. I don't know how we change that.
I think a lot of it is you have to ask yourself, it's not what you do, but it's why you do it. And I think that's a big thing. To be honest with you, like before we started this thing, I was like, oh man, if I can set a couple world records, my life is going to be so different. I'll be a different person. I'll be, this and that. And I've been very fortunate enough to set a handful now. And it doesn't mean what I thought it would mean. It doesn't feel the way I thought it would feel. And that's the same thing, whether it's somebody winning a Super Bowl, whether it's getting the promotion, whether it's getting married, whether it's having the kid, it's all the same stuff. It's like, why are you doing what you're doing? I think that's the key, is to examine that and to be earnest and honest with your motivation, rather than, the motivation of the pursuit, not just the end, of the pursuit, not just that end goal.
Easier said than done, especially in the world that we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to tie that back to social media is so much of this stuff's in your face now. And I think just it's a basic kind of human instinct in a lot of ways to want to either join in or, to feel like you're part of the group because we're pack animals, by nature, or to want to compete or, things like that. So you kind of get wrapped up into this thing.
I sometimes wonder if the social media universe, and I'll use the Kardashians as an example of a family that I know almost nothing about, other than they have a TV show and a huge following and a massive level of influence. And I think for a lot of people, that's the end state. They want to be able to live like them, travel like them, dress like them, have their ability to do whatever it is. I think a lot of the times before there's a large course correction, it has to be taken a little bit too far. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that desire will ever be taken too far and then course correct back towards something that is a little bit more manageable and achievable. And if it does, what does that end up doing to people like the Kardashians when the power that they wield, whether they think about it in those terms or not, is just less powerful? I wonder if they'll be able to tolerate that.
Yeah. Look, I think that's a good point. And what I question is, has that always been there? And are we just now experiencing it in a different way at a different velocity?
Probably.
Yeah. When you think about, back in...
I think used to be more localized.
Exactly.
There would be somebody in your community, and by that I mean, depending on what era you lived in, where you could walk or ride your horse to. Or I guarantee you there was always somebody who probably perceived to have more.
Exactly.
Now we're just doing that on a fucking global scale that is instantaneous.
Exactly. That's what it is. So it's just the magnification, I think, of something that's always existed. Like if you look back at, Greece or Rome or, whatever, is that certainly when you watch all the, read stories about her, it's just, I think it's just magnification. And to your point is that it's just gotten so sped up and it's just on such a grand scale now than we've ever dealt with before. And I don't think it's, the question is, what are people, capable or wired to deal with? Are we wired to deal with being able to reach millions of people in an instant? And
I don't think so.
And I question that. Yeah.
I am not trained in that particular aspect. I don't know. I'm not a sociologist by any stretch, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
And we're certainly on board a train of an interesting experiment that is evolving at a rapid pace that nobody can seem to control. So
yeah.
I guess we'll see how
it ends. To your point is, like, there's always an ebb and a flow. They talk about the pendulum, going one way and going the other way and things like that. But the question is kind of what brings that pendulum back at this point? Because so many people now are making so much money off this magnification and acceleration of it. It's how do you start to bring that thing back? And I think maybe the only answer is like a grassroots thing where people start, it's all the conversation we have today about doing these things on your own, where we start bringing it back. Because if somebody's making billions of dollars a year, why are they going to let it, swing back in the other direction?
I don't know. I mean, there are some people who are monetizing it well. I think the facade is that there are a lot of people. I think the few at the top are making the lion's share.
Yeah.
I don't think it trickles down as far as those who are portraying that lifestyle would want you to believe.
Yeah.
But they're kind of caught in that system.
Well, that I totally agree with. But it's the ones that are in control give you that illusion or help to facilitate and feed that illusion that so many people are in on it. When to your point, it probably is that top 0.25%, 0.5%, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's social media is something that I've struggled with is because it's a necessary tool in what we're doing.
Yeah.
But I personally don't like it. So it's tough to try to do it effectively when you don't like something. But to use it as the tool that it could be.
Hire a 20-year-old. You'll be an expert at it.
It's tough, man. It's tough. Yeah.
I try to use it. I have some kind of guiding principles on there. I try not to use it to ever knock people down. Occasionally, I will have a snarky comment or two. Michael is aware of this. But other than that, I think I use it to put stuff out there, what I am up to. Mm-hmm. Generally, though, from a professional perspective, there's so much of my personal life that is not on there.
Yeah.
I try to use it and think of it as what it is, which is just a tool.
Yeah.
And I try to make sure I'm using the tool and that the tool is not using me.
Yeah.
Even though I do appreciate some of the ads that they send me, because sometimes, I do need special socks that have extra cushioning for. I'm like, fuck. I was thinking about getting those. This device can obviously read my mind. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? Because I did need those socks. I don't know.
Yeah, but look, you said it right. Which person are you going to be? Are you going to be the person who uses it as a tool, or are you going to be the person who uses it as, hey, I went to get a cup of coffee and here you go? And the people that can't live their lives without posting so much of the stuff that's going on.
I don't know how you actually live your life while you're trying to post it all. I don't know how those. because you have to put effort into documenting it and doing all of those things where you're not really getting – it'd be the same thing as doing the speed record in a fixed wing and not having any time to actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because you're just hanging on to the ragged edge of consciousness the entire time to beat a clock that is arbitrary instead of slowing it down and enjoying the journey along the way.
Yeah.
Like if you were going to do that, and let's say you're going over Iceland and you're, oh, like, holy shit, there's an amazing glacier / volcano. I'm going to go hang out there for a couple hours. That to me is better than maybe remembering that you saw a volcano at some point.
Yeah, there's no question about it. What other adventures you have coming up?
Well, most of my adventures involve getting through Monday through Friday. It can be sporty. I have hunting coming up. So September, October is hunting season up here. I leave Friday with my wife. We'll be back early next week. We got a quick hunt in Wyoming. Then I have a hunt in Iowa, then a hunt in Texas. So a lot of my fall is full doing that type of stuff. I don't have anything on the calendar, man, as far as an adventure, I would say. I'm not against it. You know, the 777 I was involved in, that wasn't my idea.
That was fun to watch. That was really impressive.
It was fun to do.
Yeah, it was really impressive.
But it wasn't hard, though. The hard part of that was the logistics and the fucking cost. Antarctica alone, I think, was $50,000 a guy.
Yeah.
And I get it because, first off, the camp there is ridiculously amazing. They do an amazing job down there. The logistics of getting there, the airlines miles. I mean, we flew economy. Whew, I got some videos of people, just huge dudes just stuffed into the seat on international travel. It was fun, but I don't have a burning desire to try to put an expedition together. I'm not against it, but it's not like a fire that burns in me to keep doing those things.
Didn't you tell me a while back, I think maybe last time when I was here with Cats, for 511, that you're looking at doing a motorcycle trip?
I had thought about doing that with my old business partner from the coffee shop. I'm open to doing that trip, but then at the same time, I'm trying to figure out, because the reality of that trip, it falls into the same category as the speed record circumnavigating. We wanted to get all the way up to Prudhoe Bay and then drive tip to tip down to the southern tip of Florida. Well, the vast majority of the rugged beauty and wilderness is up in Alaska and Canada. And then you hit pavement flat in the flyover states, and you're going to be pinning that thing at the highest freeway speed you can get to, wanting to stop and rest. But there's not a terrain feature for fucking 3 horizons, so you're just going to keep riding. So then what does that experience become? I'd almost rather start at Prudhoe Bay and figure out a way to enjoy the journey up there, and then maybe just follow the Rockies all the way down to its southern terminus.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? But not – I don't want to – I'm not against putting a clock on things, but I'm not looking for reasons to put a clock on things.
It just – to your point, it changes the dynamic.
Well, the first thing that you get robbed of is your enjoyment. The 777 was awesome. We hung out at the pyramids for maybe an hour, and we were so freaking tired by that point anyway that people were just ready to go. And I have a vague recollection of what it looked like to jump out over the fucking pyramids, in Cairo and fly my parachute. I legitimately had the thought in my head, I'm going to land on top of this fucking thing. I'm going to get arrested. This is going to be great. This would be great media for the expedition. Yeah. This will trend for a little bit, which will probably help for fundraising. Then I didn't. We landed at an abandoned golf course, which, for people who don't know, there's fast food restaurants and hotels and golf courses right around the pyramids. They don't show up in any of the.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, this way pyramids, this way McDonald's. Yeah.
You change the angle on that one and the optic
30 degrees. Yeah,
and. Antarctica was the place where we got to spend the most time, and it was cool, and we were rested, and we knew going into it that point right there, it was the most logistically challenging because of the weather and just the location. But beyond that, it was going to be a blur, and it absolutely was, and it was enjoyable. But there are vast sections of that I have passing memories of, and I think at this point in my life, unless there's a compelling reason to do it like that, why do it like that?
Yeah.
Harder to raise attention, awareness, and funding, though, if you don't. So that's the balance.
Yeah, you gotta have just a hook, whatever it is. If it's going to be speed, if it's going to be something, and that's the biggest part. Is like we're talking about is getting the attention of the sponsors, and then breaking through and getting the attention of the public.
Yeah.
Once you have the sponsors, because it's a lot of people are like, hey, I got the sponsor now. The hard work's done. I'm like,
The hard work has begun.
Exactly. I mean, you got to maintain that sponsorship.
Yeah.
And that's even more difficult in a lot of regards.
And I don't blame the sponsors for having shifts in their priorities, shifts in their capital allocation, whatever it may be. I mean, the business world and ecosystem is real for them as well. And a lot of the stuff that they're doing, from the fundraising, donation, supporting others in those perspective, man, on the P&L, it becomes hard to justify depending on how the business world is treating them.
Yeah. But, that ties back to what we were talking about earlier is a lot of people erroneously believe once you get on that path that it's just going to be a cakewalk at that point. It's just, it's just sunshine and you're just, I'm just, it's the yellow brick road.
If somebody's ever figured that out and has become the yellow brick road for them, please hit me up with the A to Z of that, because that has not been my experience.
Finding it's one thing and staying on it day after day after day after day is a whole nother ball game. And I think that it's just, we have to be cognizant of that and we have to appreciate that and just understand it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
And far too often people are like, oh, maybe I'm not on the right path because it's so difficult or this or that. And it's, when Buddha talks about the Four Noble Truths, and the first truth is that life is suffering, and he didn't mean suffering in that regard. He means that just simply that life is difficult. There are difficulties no matter what you do. And it's to be truly appreciative of those difficulties and to expect them. And even when you're on that path, whether it's sponsorship, whether it's getting public attention on it, whether it's just successfully completing whatever you're trying to complete, it's going to be difficult. Regardless, anything that's not to sound cliche, but anything worth doing that's going to help you grow is going to be difficult. And that's one of the reasons that we do it.
Yeah, I agree, man.
Yeah.
I agree. What do you want to leave people with? We've been at it for damn near 2.5 hours.
Hey, first of all, is thank you for having me.
Of course.
I can't tell how much I appreciate it, and just sincerely thank you, and thank you, Michael, for having me in. And I think the biggest thing is just to have them, just to understand that we're not alone in this stuff. And, hopefully if they're interested is take a look at the book, Strength and Surrender.
I know it had a release date shift.
Exactly. Yeah. I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah. When's it going to come out? Because it was supposed to be
yesterday. It's actually the October 22nd was the original release date.
Okay.
But it's going to be available for pre-sale in just a few days. But January 7th is we're going to release the paperback, the audiobook, and the ebook all at the same time.
Okay.
So January 7th.
That's actually not too bad. That's not.
It's not bad. I know that you have a book that you're working on as well. It's getting released.
That'll be on 26.
26. That's what I thought. 26. That's what I thought. Yeah. So basically, is the book is about. Like we said, it has all the information about the expedition. So if you want to read about mountain climbing and ocean rowing and all the struggles and the training and all this stuff, all that's in there. But more importantly, it's what we've talked about a lot of things we've talked about. It's about evolution. It's about, my story from being in that dark, lonely place to being in a better place and still trying to figure it out, but kind of being on that path and how I went about doing it. And what I found is the most strength I've ever gained in my life was actually through surrender. And, climbing Everest it was a hell of a lot easier than fully surrendering into my fears and pain and hesitation and trepidations, and how to face those and how to release them and how to go about meeting my needs in new and better ways. So, all that's in there, but it's about, the lessons I learned on a daily basis, my main pillars, what I call meditations of things I learned through Strength and Surrender. But also there's sections in there where people can take it and apply it directly to their lives. Ask yourself and prepare yourself sections where it's just, you can instantly take this, and apply it there. So that'll be available January 7th. My Instagram is just, at Dawson's Peak, PEAK. And then lastly is that something that's very important is that, as I mentioned earlier, 100% of the net proceeds from Project 7 for Soldiers benefit the Gary Sinise Foundation, Hope for the Warriors. So I haven't made a dime on this since August 2018. And they can donate on the website on dawsonspeak.com is my personal website. That links to our foundation website. So please get involved there. And
I'll put all that in the show notes too.
And we'll send that out. But I think that's probably about it.
Hell yeah, man. Well, thanks for making the trip up.
Yeah. No, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Hell yeah. Awesome.